Good evening, everybody. At this time, I will reconvene into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for March the 10th, 2020, beginning at 6:53 p.m. Due to health and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 coronavirus, members of the public are encouraged to participate by watching the school board meeting online at www.aisd.net. One or more trustee may participate in this meeting via video conference call. A quorum of the Board of Trustees will be physically present at the administration building. Members of the public may access this meeting via AISD website at www.aisd.net. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join Mr. Bowie Hogg in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid any disruptions to those around you. And now, if you would please, join us in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Before we move on with the program, I would like to just say, since we've had our moment of silence, that this evening, if you notice, each of us trustees are wearing a black ribbon, and that is in honor of the precious life of our colleague, David Wilbank's sister, who just recently passed for cancer. So we are recognizing this for her beautiful wings that she gave, that she's now earned, and in respect for Mr. Wilbanks. Okay, now our first item on the agenda is our program presentation. Ms. Anita Foster.
Thank you, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. Tonight we're going to be dazzled by the Ousley Junior High Brass Ensemble. We're a district with scores and scores of fine arts students. These 5 here represent some of our finest across the district. Many of them are first chair and lead others in learning their instruments. They've earned spots in all region and city competitions. And tonight they're conducted by their director, Pedro Maldonado. Give us a shout, hello. There you are. And they're going to be performing a traditional New Orleans classic, When the Saints Go Marching in Mardi Gras style. So put your hands together and welcome the Ousley Junior High Brass Ensemble.
All right, thank you very much. Want to be in that number. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is our presentation for our Student of the Month. This month, our Student of the Month came from Sam Houston High School. They are unable to be here tonight, so we will highlight both our March and our April Student of the Month at our next meeting. But her name is Perla Flores, and we can give her a hand clap this evening. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is public hearing, and there is none, so we will move to our open forum for agenda item. As stated on the posted agenda, members of the public who desire to address the board regarding an item on this agenda are required to register at www.aisd.net/board meeting speaker request, no later than 3 p.m. the day of the board meeting. Mrs. Benjamin, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding agenda items?
Yes, ma'am. We have one registered speaker for an agenda item this evening, Ms. Kalaluka.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Kalaluka. I'm sure you could probably repeat this after me, but I'll say it anyway. This is a routine part of the school board's agenda for regularly scheduled meetings. This segment of the meeting provides citizens with an opportunity to share their views with the trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It is not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to speakers. Derogatory comments aimed at an individual will not be tolerated. Personnel matters are not appropriate subjects for open forum. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Mrs. Benjamin will notify you when your time is up, and please end your presentation at that time. Mrs. Kalaluka, your time has started.
Hey, well, good evening. I am here in my classroom because it is open house night, but I did not want to miss getting a chance to speak with y'all. I promised you I would be at every board meeting, so I'm going to be at every board meeting. And I'm going to ask you to keep it simple, take all of the extra trainings and meetings and things away from teachers so we can plan wonderful instruction for our students. And one of the things that I always tell my students, I don't know if you can see this sheet there here. I tell my students that helps them remember to be their very best every day in everything. And being kind, being safe, being neat, working hard, those are the things that we need to do. And I hope that you will use all the personnel you have to help the students learn and keep it simple. Have a great day. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you. Have a great, great night.
I've got a student in here who wants to tell you. Oh.
Hi. I love your
Awesome.
hat.
Have a good night.
All right, good evening. Okay, the next thing on our agenda are action items. Our first action item is consider notice of election. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays and members of the board. You have before you a notice of election for trustee election to be held May 7th, 2022. The election is being held to elect members to 3-year terms for places 4 and 5 on the Board of Trustees. The notice of election shall be published in a newspaper published in the territory that is covered by the election at least once, not earlier than the 30th day or later than the 10th day before the election. The notice of election shall state the date of the election, each place to be filled, information regarding the location of each early voting and election day polling place, the dates and hours of early voting, and the hours the polls will be open on election day. If you approve the notice of election, it would be appropriate to hear a motion at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Mrs. Fowler?
Thank you, President Mays. I move to approve the notice of election for the May 7th, 2022 trustee election.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Fowler, a second by Dr. Reich. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. The motion passes. Our next action item is consider the board handbook. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays. And as in previous board meetings, the board has had an opportunity to review the revised handbook with tweaks and edits. The governance committee is over that revision, so Mr. Chapa has led that effort, and I'll turn it to him.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. President Mays, we have presented the board handbook at a couple meetings now. We had to withdraw it from the agenda at the last meeting, but at this time, I'd like to move to adopt the board handbook as presented. There have been no changes since the last time it was presented to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Second. Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Chapa, a second by Mrs. Fowler. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Motion passes. Our next action item is consider an easement and right-of-way. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, and we bring before you a consideration for an easement and right-of-way for a 3,110 square foot tract of land as described in the board book for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Do I have a motion? Or any questions? Mrs. McMurray?
President Mays, if there is no discussion, I would like to make a motion. I move to grant the attached easement and right-of-way to Encore Electrical Delivery Company LLC for a 3,110 square foot tract of land situated in the J.M. Henderson Survey, abstract number 696, in the city of Arlington, Tarrant County, Texas, and being a portion of Block AR Fairview Edition, an addition to the city of Arlington, Tarrant County, Texas, according to the plat recorded in volume 388-156, page 95 of the plat records of Tarrant County, Texas.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. McMurray. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. McMurray, a second by Mr. Chapa. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Motion passes. Next action item, consider missed school day waiver due to inclement weather. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, and this evening we bring for the board's consideration a request to submit a waiver for the inclement weather day of February 24th, 2022, for us to submit to TEA. And we have a brief presentation by Dr. Hill.
Good evening, President Mays, board members, and Dr. Cavazos. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to consider this waiver. And so the purpose, again, is to seek board approval to submit the waiver to the Texas Education Agency for the missed school days waiver. That's what they call it in their internal process. Background is on February 23rd, Arlington ISD and much of North Texas experienced some pretty bad weather that made it, unsafe for us to continue school on the 24th. Weather conditions were very bad, and we decided, along with a lot of other school districts in North Texas, to close on that day, as you're well aware. Again, TEA offers many waiver opportunities. The one that we're seeking now is a missed school days waiver. And that waiver is, again, granted by TEA. It can be used for weather conditions, health, or safety-related issues. And in this, the first 2 days must be addressed before you apply for this waiver. Those days are addressed either through makeup days that are built into the calendar or through additional minutes that are built into the calendar. And there are supporting documents that we have to submit to TEA along with documentation that the board approves the district submitting the waiver. Just a little bit about this, so you all know on February 3rd, we were closed due to inclement weather. That's not the day that we're seeking. That day was covered by the additional calendar minutes, the same as February 4th. February 24th, that's the day that we're submitting the missed school days waiver for. If you all will recall, because of that weather, we had a late arrival on February 25th, and those hours were covered again by the additional minutes that were built into the calendar. So if approved by the board and then ultimately by TEA, this move would not impact, students would not have to make up any days again because those minutes are built in, and we would get the waiver, and there would be no change to the end of the 21-22 school year for students. And so administration recommends the board approve administration submitting that waiver to TEA for the missed school days.
Thank you,
We'll be
Dr.
able
Hill.
to take any questions that you may have about it.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Didn't mean to cut you off. Are there any questions of Dr. Hill? Okay, do I have a motion? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, Madam President. I would move to approve the submission of the missed school day waiver as, to the Texas Education Agency as presented by Mr. Hill.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Wilbanks, a second by Mrs. Fowler. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Thank you very much, Dr. Hill. Our next action item is consider resolution to grant paid leave for employees not able to work due to inclement weather. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. As is customary, when we close for a day, we bring a resolution to the board for the continuity of pay for employees that weren't able to work during that inclement weather. And so for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Mays. At this time, I move that we adopt the following resolution entitled, "A Resolution to Grant Paid Leave for Employees Not Able to Work Due to Inclement Weather." Whereas on February 24th and 25th, 2022, Arlington Independent School District and much of the Metroplex closed its schools and/or delayed its start time in response to severe winter weather in Texas for the safety of all students and staff. Whereas Texas Education Code Section 25.081 authorizes the Commissioner of Education to approve requests for a variance in total instructional minutes if the district is closed for disasters, floods, or extreme weather conditions or other emergencies that force the closing of schools. And whereas TEC Section 42.005 authorizes the Commissioner of Education to adjust the average daily attendance of a district if the district is closed for disasters, floods, extreme weather conditions, or other emergencies that have a significant effect on the district's attendance. And whereas the Commission of Education has stated that TEC Section 21.401C represents a legislative determination that a public purpose exists to continue educators' salaries during times of emergencies. And whereas all district employees, contractual and at will, contribute to the achievement of the educational mission of Arlington ISD, therefore be it resolved by the Board of Trustees that 1, payment is authorized for all regular employees, excluding short-term substitutes, temporary employees, and contractors in all campus facilities, support facilities, and administrative offices on February 24th, 2022, in the morning of February 25th, 2022, who were unable to participate in scheduled work due to severe weather, district closure, and delayed start time. 2, the Board of Trustees hereby 1, determines that these payments serve a public purpose. 2, retains sufficient control over the expenditures to ensure a public purpose is served. And 3, is confident the district will receive a return in benefit dated today, 2022.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chapa. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Chapa, a second by Mr. Wilbanks. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All present, vote in the affirmative. Thank you very much. Thank you to the administration for bringing this forward to allow us to vote for paid leave for our employees in addition to the waiver for our students. Thank you. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is our discussion action items. Our first discussion action item is consider the schematic design for Arlington High School. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. This evening, we bring for board consideration the schematic design for Arlington High School and the high school Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy edition for Arlington High School. And so, again, like many points in Arlington's history here, we bring this as an expansion to Arlington High School. It's an exciting project, and it's a big part of our 2019 bond program. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Horn to introduce our architects and get us started.
Thank you, President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. We're excited tonight to bring schematic design to you of our presentation. And so I'm going to introduce Mr. Jonathan Aldis with VLK, just a bit about where we are today. So the schematic design is we're still very early on, but this gives you an opportunity to see kind of where we're going after we've had numerous meetings with staff and senior administration and so forth, and our various departments to make sure that we've quantified and we've developed, at least at this point, the type of programming that we need to satisfy the needs of the school going forward. And so this is kind of that next step to take place after our project with Gunn finishes. So we'll get this one started, and we'll have this one opening right about the time that those students matriculate up through to the High School Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy. So Jonathan, if you will, come up.
Thank you, Kelly. Dr. Cavazos, Board of Trustees. I won't repeat a lot of what Kelly said, but I will say this is an exciting project for me personally as well. I've been fortunate enough to be involved with Jones, Corey, Gunn, and now I feel like I'm getting old because these students are chasing me and they're quickly closing in on us, very quickly closing in. It's exciting, though, I'll tell you, to be a part of it. As Kelly said, we're in Schematic, but I do want to walk with you guys through kind of the key project goals and tell you what the framework that we've been working within. And I think it's important to set that because this is not just about the fine arts dual language children, it is about Arlington High School. And I'd like to remind everybody as well, while there are pieces that come with the fine arts dual language program, specific elements that these students have seen since elementary, we have to remember also this is an addition of students to Arlington High School, because after all, you have other students who have joined this cohort and are moving up that would never be attending Arlington High. This is a fairly large addition in addition to being a fine arts dual language addition. So keep that in mind, and I'll run you through a few. I won't read all the bullet points to you, but as we visit the existing campus, just like with any other campus, we look for what other intractable issues are on campus that the addition could solve in addition to just accommodating what we were expecting. The building, when I say the first floor of Arlington High School, that could be any one of 6 first floor levels on Arlington High School, is an issue. Doesn't matter to most people unless you happen to be a child in a wheelchair, for instance. There are issues that are just impossible to get to or very difficult to get to. So we knew that had to be an issue from the beginning. And then without getting too much into it, you guys put a tremendous amount of effort acquiring the piece of land to allow this project to happen. So we knew where the addition would be. How do we not just have one more addition to the building that has the same circulation connectivity issues as the rest? And probably first and foremost, the sense of pride in Arlington High School. The idea that this high school has a storied tradition, a proud past, and this is a major change, bringing a lot more students to campus. Dr. Cavazos, both principals who we've worked with so far on the project have been very clear on the fact that this is not a space for one group of students and not for all. This is a space for everybody. We're all Colts. This is for everyone. And so how do we infuse the arts even into the non-art spaces? And I think you'll see that solution, and we've laid out. I'd step back 1 second just to give you a general orientation of the 2 images that you see there. The little demolition, it looks innocuous, doesn't it? A little demolition in red. It just happens to be, this will not be an easy project because those pieces are removed in order for the construction to start. But I want you to get an idea of the scale. When you think of the Shell station, obviously that fire lane that you're all accustomed to wraps around where the where that demo portion is here. 1 second. So really the existing fire lane that parents have now learned is the way to come and stack in the afternoons instead of parking at the Shell station. It's not there anymore. So this is a necessary part of demolition that happens, but I just want you to look for a moment at the approximate scale. So we're targeting about 120,000 square feet. I don't want to say it in front of some people in the room who would like more square feet. We're a little bit under that right now, but that's our goal, is to stay as tight as we can. But this gives you an idea of, this is not a small project. It's a fairly major change to the campus. The color blocks that you see in this image just indicates a blend. So when you see blue, it means core classrooms. When you see pink, it means fine arts. When you see kind of the dark blue is science, the orange is admin. Kind of pulled that apart so you can see this isn't just about adding classrooms, it's adding everything. And one of the issues we identified also on the campus is, if you've been in the Arlington High School library, you can probably understand that it's just under half size of what the Texas Education Agency would expect for a contemporary high school. Does not mean you're out of any sort of compliance, it just doesn't compare to what the TEA requires now. And it's a bit of a traditional library of the time. And so if we're going to reinvent the front door, if we're going to create kind of the whole new stance of Arlington High School, we have identified that early on as a piece that would be a natural piece to improve, really make the heart of the building by putting it first and foremost at the entry. And I think that's an incredible change. It also lets us take the old library space and reclaim that for classrooms, which is a pretty efficient use of space that we have. And then all of this with the goal in mind of, we know that there will still be changes to Arlington High School in the future. We don't know what those would be. But for this edition, addressing connectivity with a mind toward what might happen in the future. We know you've invested a lot of money in A Hall with all the new windows. Looks fantastic. So I'm going to say, I'm pretty sure A Hall is going to be there for the foreseeable forever, let's say. But anything else, we're trying to address connectivity issues and make sure that students have some issues now, or for instance, to get from A to B Hall upstairs, you either go all the way down around the dining room or you go downstairs back up. So we're trying to pick up little pieces like that with an eye toward what might this look like in the future. So hopefully you'll see elements of that when you see the plan as well. Again, just to give you an idea of impact on the site and a very schematic site plan, you can see the lighter color is the addition. So pretty much everything up to the wall of the auditorium, that's where band and admin are. The new addition would start there, essentially. That's what you're seeing in the image. What this gives us an opportunity to do, we're working with the curb cuts and entries we have off of Cooper. And so our goal at the moment is to leave those in place, but that should allow us also to actually get off-street queuing or delivery or parking at the front door. If you visit the school now, you know you're parallel parking. And for those of us from Texas, you're not parallel parking. I just go park in the student parking because I can't, in an F-150, I can't get in a parallel parking spot. So the goal would be to leave those spaces there, but really to improve kind of general visitors. My child forgot their lunch. I need to bring a book to campus, drop off. We are still working through with staff, for instance, because office staff parks, as you may know, along the roadway that's next to the Shell station now. So that will have to be recouped as well. And we need to have initial conversations with city. We've shown them a very preliminary idea of this, but this would be a first pass at site planning with really very little change along the Cooper face other than to reorient the building to that side. I won't get too much into, I know I told you schematic, and yet I have doors and windows dropped in this. So I can tell you after our meetings with staff yesterday, this is more schematic than I thought. We have some changes to make, but that's to be expected. Again, just focus on the big color blocks. So this is first floor. I want to orient you very quickly. I'm sure you've picked up on it by now, but existing front door, as you know, enters at the auditorium and the administration space here. That's how it is as current. With this shift and reorienting the building toward Cooper, this is now main administrative area. So this is the entry portal, secure entry, of course. And again, the color scheming is you see blue. Those are core classrooms. Usually that's math, social studies. Science, of course, will be science labs, and you'll see those later. And then this light purple, violet color that you see are fine arts. The larger block that I'm in right now is the band area. We have a drama area. We have the orchestra area. And this large portion that you see in yellow is the relocated library space that occupies a 2-story volume, kind of front and center at the front door. We have some details to work through on that on openness versus how closed that is. But as you'll see in some interior images I'll show you, it really starts to set the tone for Arlington High School as you begin to approach the campus now. We have to match a few floor levels, but we've gotten it down to 2 levels. And again, that's kind of the eye toward the future approach. We've actually gone so far as to plan if in the future these were to be connected. These are some of those issues I was talking about with connectivity. To get to D Hall, there's one way. To get to E Hall, you have to go through the one way of D Hall to the one way to get to E Hall. There is a plan for that, and we kind of went all the way down that path, and then we've pulled back to this plan. So the good news is it's solvable in the future. It's just got to be in the future. For right now, the focus is on this work. I'll point out one more thing on the first floor. This area, if you're familiar with the campus, is actually that small alley where every utility that serves the building goes. So other than that, it's a very simple, straightforward addition. But power, mechanical, gas, and the chiller system all are in that portion of the building. So it's going to be an interesting addition renovation cycle. Ms. Humbles is up for the challenge. I think she's starting to understand what she might be up for. Moving up to second floor, as I said, the library, and if you're familiar with the Gunn campus, for instance, the tech learning space that is above the library at Gunn. Right now we have the position similarly here, but we also have additional library space on that second floor. So it's not just the tech space, it's additional, whether it's study carrels or collaboration space upstairs. And you're starting to see, as I mentioned, science labs that can now face toward the north, core classrooms, and 2-dimensional art, 3-dimensional art, and dance. And this is not Colt Kickers. The Colt Kickers still have a space. They're already on campus. This is one of those things that has traveled with the fine arts students from the beginning. Even at the elementary, they have a dance space. This is intended to be that space. Doesn't mean it's only for those students, but it is one of those things that specifically comes with them, as well as pairing up that 2D and 3D art. We've done that, and it was done at Gunn along with the tech lab. So that's one of those elements. The high bay area here is just the band that's beneath that. And you'll start to see connectivity, like I was talking about, to now get us back connected, to start connecting back to B Hall, so that we improve not just our circulation, but even circulation in the existing building has an ability to kind of connect back through and loop. And then finally, top floor is really just this one bay that you see highlighted, and that's the face along Cooper, and that is more science classrooms and core classrooms. You would think that would make this thing stand incredibly high, but the reality is, and I'll show you in a second, this all really ends up no higher than the level of the current auditorium. Because the reason that building has so many floor levels is the site keeps dropping. And as the building follows that, this actually gives you a great opportunity to have a dominant elevation on Cooper that is not overwhelming. I think it scales perfectly and really ties into the existing building very well. So looking from the Cooper elevation, this is Smoothie King is what somebody pointed out to me today. If you're standing in the, everybody orients themselves by Chicken Express or Smoothie King when we talk about the exterior. So this is Smoothie King. Standing across Cooper, you remember I showed you that parking, kind of a horse track shaped parking. Someone pointed out that looks like a horse track. The cars would be on the other side. Right now, we've suggested the Arlington High School sign kind of as a cast concrete sign. We know how high school students like to walk off with memorabilia, particularly school signs. But this is all, as we said, very schematic. We need to walk through. There may be an opportunity to add more parking here. Mr. Hogg brought up a great point when we showed it to him, that we may need to address that, and that's perfectly doable. But architects like to dream about these clean, pristine things, and then we need to work toward what staff needs and can work with. And architects always like to dream that you'll turn on the lights on our buildings at night, and we know that's probably not reasonable. We at least show you the picture of, that could be a really nice space. What you're seeing in the middle of that image, importantly, is that library space that we were talking about. Now, because it's facing east, you're seeing these vertical fins that are really a solar shade system that assures that you're not getting direct sunlight into there. But as you'll see in the interior renders, that space in a normal daytime is just bathed in natural sunlight, which would be great. Again, we have some details to work through. And the elements you see on your right is really the new entry pace. I'll take you around the corner just a bit as we're now starting to turn toward West Park Row. This is that three-story classroom stack that we were talking about with the administration piece here. In terms of materiality, I do want to address that for a moment. I apologize, I don't have the longer image down Park Row, but the building is actually, won't surprise you, it's about 5 different bricks that were all intended to be the same brick. So what we're having to be careful about is whichever we're getting closest to, that is really intended to be the brick tone. So here, for instance, that image looks a little, this is your current auditorium entry, and it has these brick wings. I'm not intending for this brick to be this color and that to be that. The goal is that those would match up. And so using that same materiality all along that Park Row face, the other material that you're seeing here is what we call an insulated metal panel system. If you drive by tonight and look at the windows, when you replace the windows, that's what you went back with also as an insulated metal panel, so a silver metal panel system that fills that in. It's a pretty dominant, when we look at it, it's a dominant horizontal line. And so as we looked at the overall composition, we wanted to bring that same material, kind of a same element, use it in a little bit different way, because we wanted to make sure that this reads as the front door, because that elevation is now very long, and it actually is bookended on the other end by the dining room. So I think as an overall composition, which I can show you a little bit from this next image, it works well. It's not intended to separate itself completely by using a lot of the same materials, using them a little bit differently. The original building has these concrete eyebrows that are a horizontal element. And so we've mimicked that eyebrow detail and kind of updated into a contemporary material that's already on the building. And finally, the plaza that you see, if you're familiar with the plaza now, you walk up the stairs to the auditorium, and there's a retaining wall here because that fire lane is there. Our goal is to remove that and gradually ramp that plaza back down toward the corner, because if you've been by here at lunchtime, you can hardly see the building for the teenagers. And we expect that will continue, because that tends to be the space where they congregate. They go and grab lunch and they hang out in that area. Well, now we have the administration right there, which helps, but it also lets them have that space without, you get a teenage boy a wall to jump off of or fall off. Usually they'll find an opportunity to do either one of those. I can speak for experience. And then jumping back up from, this gives you an idea, as I talked about, with mass and height. So when you think about, that's the height of the existing auditorium, that's really the height of this piece as well. So overall in composition, we think it announces nicely that the front door is very clear, but it is not an overwhelming building on the street. And it's the same setback line on Park Row. So where the building sits on Park Row now, we don't come any closer. On Cooper, we're still, you can see they're a little bit behind the gym entry even. That's the A gym, the competition gym. We're set back a bit. As Kelly said, there's still some push and pull, so things may move a few feet here and there. But by and large, this would be the approach to it, and pretty comfortable with the approach to massing. This gives you an idea of if you drive, park, and you're headed toward, up to your far end is the entry in the front door. This is really just to show the library would be to your left. And so the hope is that you're also creating kind of an outdoor plaza there as well. Because again, we have students tend to hang around at this campus. And if that's going to be the case, the goal would be to have them in spaces where it's easier to see, easier to control, and easier to just keep an eye on things. And then jumping inside quickly, just to give you an idea of when I talk about the library. So what you're seeing here is that tech space or maker lab, or I'm not sure what word we've assigned to it. I've heard it called something differently in the last day, so I'm going to call it what I used to call it at Gunn, which was a tech lab, but I think Dr. Wirtz has some control over it now, so we need to have a conversation about what happens in that space. But this gives you an idea of the idea of reinventing the library. In talking with library services, they're a little bit excited and a little bit concerned because this is really the first time you've had a chance to rethink the high school library in Arlington. So I can guarantee you we'll be putting a ton of thought into this. We had almost 2 hours just on library yesterday, and so we've got some feedback. But we just wanted everybody to understand the scale of the space. So for instance, if you're on the upper hallway, you have the capability, looking down into the library, the tech space, out to your far left is back out toward Cooper, just to reorient you. You're kind of looking south now, and the hallway back down. So to your right and up a level is two-dimensional art, three-dimensional art, and dance. So literally, as you walk down the main hallway on that floor, there's art, and dance. On the ground floor, it's orchestra, drama, band. So when we talk about integration, you may be going to a math classroom that's in that 3-story stack, but literally every step you take through this area of the building, you're reminded of the fact of the history of the arts in Arlington ISD and the importance that you guys have chosen to place on the Fine Arts Through Language program as an incredible art space, not just for these kids, because this band hall is the band hall for Arlington High School, and it now gets to be built up to ed spec, an improvement over what you have. But we think that's a great bridge to communicate to every student who walks in the doors of Arlington High School that this is about everyone being a Colt, and it's a space accessible for all. So I think that's what I have for images, and I'll be happy to address any questions I may have left out there. I'm sure I did.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. Glad to see that you are matriculating along with the students as you're building these.
If I can make it to their graduation, I'll be so proud.
Okay, Mrs. Fowler.
Thank you, President Mays. I just want to thank you and VLK Architects for taking in things into consideration, your thoughtful process. You didn't just come in and design and go. You listened to feedback, you redid things, brought it back, and I just really appreciate that. And you're very concerned about keeping the culture of the school and the traditions of the school, and I think that's very important. So I just want to thank you all for doing that.
Well, thank you. We are a solid 9 months into this, so this is not a quick plan, and staff has had a huge part of that. We were in a very different direction, and they've been very helpful at getting us oriented around the right direction. So it's not us, it's your team that works with us as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. Mr. Wilbanks.
Thank you, President Mays. And wow, you guys, recently there was an open house at Gunn Junior High. A lot of wow factor there, a lot of thumbs up for Gunn. And I think we're going to get a lot of wows when this opens up to students as well. I agree with you. The thing I like most about this is this campus has always lacked a main entrance that was obvious. And that's one of the fallbacks that we've kind of struggled with over the years. Also, it's one of the campuses that's been added on here and there over the years. And I think this addition is going to finally kind of create that prominence that it needs. And I really love the way you've reoriented it to Cooper Street. My only, and this is a small complaint, and it's just one of the things I don't think that these renderings do justice to, because, yeah, I think it's a great design, but as I said, we've added on over the years. One of the most recent is down Park Row, the new cafeteria, which has a curvilinear design, which was really nice. A lot of students were really happy to get a nice modern cafeteria. This design's very opposite of curvilinear.
Not curvilinear, I agree.
And, which, you know, can work, but I'm just curious of your thoughts of, you know, if, you know, how you're planning to
Sure.
marry those two or contrast those together to where they work in tandem together?
We actually have spent probably an inordinate amount of time having that discussion. It's funny that you'd bring that up, because when we look at a pure elevation, which nobody can ever see it because you can't ever get far enough back, but we stitched all the additions together, pinned it up, and had a long conversation about it. You really have a kind of an ABA pattern here. There's this mass, then the one-time front door, where the counselors are now, is a B,
Yep.
an A, and then you had a bookend on the end that broke that pattern altogether. And so we went through a few different iterations of, we quite literally entertained, should this thing have some curvature, at least respond to it in some way. And after all the iterations we went through, for us, it was the entry to the auditorium, which is still gonna be a dominant piece. It's still a piece, gives us what we consider enough of a visual break. So the rhythm of the building, we've kind of used the massing of the existing pieces. We are planning that break at that gives us enough separation that, again, says this is not that. Now, the massing is somewhat similar. It's not as tall on the far end. But all that to say, it's not something we dismissed without looking at. But I think the end result was, we really wanted this to be understood very clearly, because we keep hearing the commentary, nobody really knew where the front door was for Arlington High School before.
It's clear now.
So, yeah, thank you.
In a very
I'll take
good
that
way.
as a compliment.
It is
Whether you
clear
meant that
now.
or not, I'll take it as a compliment. So, yes, we did have a long conversation. Again, our goal was keep the materiality the same, use the brick, the metal banding, but then kind of unapologetically on this end, set this piece apart. And one of the great things about this end of the building, well, you have oak trees on everything, but this is all north, and so the opportunity to get north light into classrooms is fantastic, so we tried to maximize that. When we looked at starting to even copy the glass pattern, or mimic the glass pattern, it almost felt like there was too much to it, because if you look at the dining, it has, it has
Yeah.
mullions, pretty closely spaced.
Yeah.
We've purposely gone broader here, again, to kind of separate that language a little bit. So, it's been discussed, it's not something that wasn't thought through, but in the end, for us, this massing was successful in terms of pulling this piece separate from the other. Not completely, you can always argue, but the goal is not to have it look like an addition, but to have it as a stated language on the building that responds to the rest of it without copying it. Long way of saying, I hear what you're saying. But
Yeah. So, like I said, that was a small complaint. I know a lot of times, you know, you can kind of go with it, but that doesn't work always. And so I've seen some really fantastic designs where they play off the contrast.
Sure.
And there's a lot of contrast here, so.
And I didn't point out that, not to copy anything from Lamar, because we're not doing that, but you do have, if the mood were to strike us, this area of large glass that's kind of the break between the entry to the auditorium, and that could be sort of the fritted glass that you have with the Viking at Lamar, so.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I know we need more double horseshoes, I was told that
That would
also.
be cool. But
we'll
they
get to
kind of
that
already
next.
had that on the other piece, so.
Yes, I have a feeling after talking with Ms. Humbles, there's not enough double horseshoes we can put on a building. I've told her we would table that until after you guys have seen it, and we'll come back and have that
Well, that's what she
conversation.
wants. That's what I'll vote for tonight.
Well, that's not helping me any. We'll come back later and talk about it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Mrs. McMurray?
Thank you so much for the presentation and for all the hard work and collaboration with Ms. Humbles and Arlington High staff that's gone into this. I'm really excited and impressed. Can you go back to the picture of the upper library?
Oh, I'm sorry, this way.
Yes, yeah, that one right there. So all of the, I guess, outside the classroom, everything that we can see outside of classrooms, kind of interior spaces, I see a lot of natural lighting. When we talk about the new classrooms that will be built, are they going to have that same enhanced natural lighting? Because I couldn't tell from the exterior schematic
Yes,
whether or
so-
not that was going to be windows.
So behind us is, yes, so behind us is a classroom bay on the 2 levels above, and they all have northern glass to them. So, for instance, this is all classroom area, and that's glass for each of those classrooms, including the class of people, of teachers we normally shove to the inside of the building, which are science labs. They're usually people that never see daylight. Now, I still have to get all the miles of casework they like to get in their room, so, but we've made a conscious effort here to even try and get science pushed on exterior glass so that it has the ability to have glass in view. Now, and then we have 3 classrooms down here. You can't see behind those beautiful crepe myrtles that don't exist, but they would also have exterior windows right there. So it's always our goal to get them to the exterior. Now, for instance, in full disclosure, to take over the old library, which is very much an internal space, for economy's sake, there are 8 classrooms going in there. So I won't claim that every classroom has it, but every new classroom we've tried to create, we've tried to get it to the glass. And even for art and dance, it's a little bit hard to see here because I don't have my laser pointer turned on. It just occurred to me. What we're proposing right now are what we call light monitors on the roof, and these are north-facing. It's not a skylight, but it's vertical glass that's intended to bring daylight. So they're interior spaces, but the goal of those is even in those interior spaces, we're capturing natural light, especially for the art studios, and
That's
capturing
great.
putting them in there.
That's great to hear. And, you know, a lot of people just prefer natural lighting just because it makes the space look nice. It's pretty. But this is very intentional because there's research that actually shows that natural lighting in a school, it enhances morale. It reduces students' off-task behaviors.
Right,
It actually, there's some research that shows it improves test scores. And so I'm really glad that you guys are being intentional about that. And I had one more question about the fine arts spaces. If you can go back to that very first interior picture that kind of showed the
Oh, an image or a floor plan?
the floor plan.
Okay.
So is there any concern about acoustics with the library being right next to the band hall?
As I told Ms. Mays and Mr. Hogg the other day, I have a really great acoustical engineer who is very clear on my fear about that. And so they're actually the acoustical engineer you guys have used on your Performing Arts Center that I use. I use them specifically for sound isolation. When it sounds great when we say we're going to blend everything, but that automatically makes me a little bit afraid because we usually put band and music at the end of a building because we assume they just generate noise nonstop. But the reality is with well thought out and well planned acoustics, but that means kind of separating structure. It's a lot of stuff you would never see, but they're already engaged on this in terms of they've been told, unless the door opens, I don't want to hear anything coming out of there. Now, our weakness in any acoustical system is when the door opens. But other than that, I have no doubt that they can get us isolated.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. McMurray. Mr. Hogg?
Thank you, President Mays. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks to the team at VLK. We enjoyed having the conversation with you when we originally looked at this. I agree with Ms. Humbles. There can't be enough horseshoes placed around there, and I know
To
we've
be fair,
talked.
I already told her that you agreed with her, and
We-
I shouldn't
we-
have said that.
We talked about in our initial meeting, you know, that front right corner right on Cooper Street. That's a big empty wall that 2 giant metal horseshoes would look.
I conveyed that to my team also, just so that they would know in advance and for when they saw this video tonight.
Because I'm not a huge fan of stripes and those things on the building, so horseshoe is a way better way to go there. And then the other thing. The other thing you can't hear enough of this year at Arlington ISD parking, and I know you mentioned it earlier, and you and I have talked about it. You know, I always say the great thing about architects is y'all are probably always more worried about how it looks. You want it to look pretty, but also very functional on that side, and y'all do a really good job. And so I know we've talked about on that side for Cooper, potentially having parking on both sides. And I know
Sure.
as y'all start ironing out more, I just continue taking that in consideration. And whether that's, And I agree with your thought. You almost sold me the other day. I was like, ooh, that looks nice, having that big brick
Shouldn't have said anything else.
design thing. But it can move out, and I think it also provides a safety area. Let me ask, is there enough, and here's my question, on pick up, with a lot of ninth graders, they're dropped off and they're sent to school that way. Not as many students drive. And so where is the natural drop-off point? Is it still along Park Road there, and that's going to be an entrance? Because the little front, I called it a horse track, a racetrack that we have right there of the front. That's going to get pretty crowded pretty quick, and exiting on Cooper is never the easiest thing on there. What's the natural flow of the drop-off there?
I'm going to speculate on parent behavior. Just that.
Yeah.
That if I were dropping off here, I probably would also avoid pulling in and back out on Cooper.
Yeah.
I would go to a slow roll and have my child jump while I'm driving down West Park Road.
Which makes all of us
But
nervous.
I'm a little bit callous in terms of
Yeah.
parenting. Now, I'm not the best model. But that pull-out lane, or in other words, that parallel parking lane, it will still be there. And you still will be able to enter the building. Now, depending on how Ensemble wants to open the doors in the morning, there's still an entry that's here. It is not, of course, our primary entry during the day.
Yeah.
But if that's on keyless entry, I would expect these doors would still be open, because parents are still gonna pull into the shopping center, not get out of the car, but at least park long enough, and I think kids are still gonna be using that crosswalk. Now, I am certain that's a question I'm going to hear again at a municipal building in town, and we'll have to have that conversation. So, there's not a lot, as you know, there are not a lot of great solutions for as close as the building already is to the street. And improvements to Cooper, I think that's kind of out the window. So our hope is if we can stay with the curb cuts, come up with a plan, work with the most likely traffic engineer to work with the city to see what our expectation is. But I think Dr. Cavazos brought up the other day, when the Shell station was there, they would wait at the Shell station. Now the Shell station's gone, they've moved into the fire lane. Now I'm gonna take the fire lane away. I'm curious to see where they go during construction, because during that year and a half, 2 years of construction, they're gonna find another pattern. And then you train that group and their kids are gone. But I suspect West Park Road is still probably gonna be the side that most parents are gonna find a way to just get the kid out of the car and keep moving, because I would not try and turn back onto Cooper if I were them.
Perfect, thank you. And you answered my other question, because I don't think we talked about what was going into the old library situation. And so that's gonna
Yes, sir.
be just some standard 8 classrooms, I think is what we're saying.
It's
Because
actually-
it's a very undersized library now for a
It
high
is.
school as it is.
Like I said, it's about half the size. I mean,
Yeah.
half the size. I can't emphasize that enough. And it's perfectly aligned. It's a double bay classroom corridor structurally already, so it's a pretty easy infill job to do. And it's an economical way to pick up 8 more classroom spaces.
And I'm assuming that construction will start after everything else is completed.
Ideally, that would be the summer of '24 when we do the final tie-in pieces, meaning
Okay.
you're closing in, the students arrive in the fall of '24, and so we have 2 summers, not counting this summer, of '23 and '24 to do tie-in work. I would suspect the contractor will only be at a stage starting in spring of '24, where you know you're finishing, and now you can start doing small projects. But summer of '24 will be a very productive summer.
Okay, thank you.
Final tie-in.
I appreciate it. Thanks for y'all's hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Mays. I just have a few questions. The first question I had is the number of classrooms that we're adding. How many students are we anticipating
Great question.
show up at Arlington High that are new students?
I bring that, so this is designed for adding capacity of 1,000. The cohort for gun coming up is slightly over that, but we have to keep in mind, some of those students were already gonna be attending Arlington High School. So early on, we looked at, is there a disproportionate number of students from Arlington High? Should we discount that by? Turns out you're pretty evenly enrolling, ironically. The students seem right now to be fairly evenly enrolled across there, so we kind of discounted the 1,100 cohort by 20-25%, and then designed a little bit above that. So max capacity addition is 40 core classrooms, which puts you, plus the music spaces don't count toward capacity, just counting the core classrooms, it's 1,000 capacity that you're adding. So not a small addition overall to the building.
So this is adding 40 classrooms?
Yes,
Okay.
40 of the core classrooms, yes.
And then, question on the part of the, can you pull up the map where you showed the little dotted line, and you mentioned the connectivity piece that was pulled out?
Let's see.
So my question is, it sounded like this was originally part of what you would have presented today. Is that right?
What's that?
The connectivity piece here was part of the original schematic design.
In part of the 9 months that we were working through, one iteration we had didn't have the building pulled as close to Cooper and Park Row. It had it pulled back between, and it literally connected D, E, B building. But what it ended up being was a very invasive demolition replacement and not as much up toward Cooper and Park Row. So it was an early iteration that actually is kind of given us a solution for the future. Those pieces could still be implemented because nothing has changed. It could still just tie onto that in the future if you wanted to do that.
So what do you think we're losing by pulling that out now? What are we waiting?
The issue we heard about every time was, if you've been in this building, it's that area right there. It's where students come from C Hall to D Hall and E Hall, because this is E. I guess I assume everybody knows which hall is which. I'm sorry. This is D Hall and this is E Hall. If you notice, the only way under current ways of addressing campus safety to get to E Hall is through D Hall. I think there's a covered canopy out here that I think during the time of those additions, they expected was, well, students can just walk outside. Well, we don't encourage that, right? The real bottleneck that we heard from Dr. Dalla when he was at the campus is where C and D come together, because there's no second floor connection. So imagine every student who's coming to the 2 floors of classrooms out here has to pass through that one point. So there's stairs, ramps. So for passing period, this is the most congested area. So that's the predominant thing I would say isn't being addressed with this. It still can be in the future, but that's probably the thing that would have been the preferable thing to fix had we the ability to do that.
And do you think that there is a safety component to that? Like, is there a value add on the safety side to have done this part of the project?
I don't know that I would sell it as safe. You still have students within the building. I'd have to talk to Ms. Humbles about, is that a disciplinary or not? Every time we've been there and observed it, her staff is very well on top of that area, because it could be, I mean, anytime you get that many kids trying to go through one point, but it is not an unmonitored part of the building. They put a good deal of effort into making sure that nothing that shouldn't be happening is. So I can't speak to what she might have with safety there, but it's certainly manageable. It's just not preferable if you're going to do it long term.
And this is the largest part of the project in the 19 bond, correct?
It is the largest 2019 bond project, size and cost and everything else, because there's softball also improvement in here, Kelly,
Yes.
that we're not gonna get into tonight, but it's all part of the high school improvement efforts as well.
Right, so there's facility improvements really throughout the whole building in terms of maintenance and things like that. It's just, this is the addition part that we're focused on today.
Certainly, that's correct. And I might add too, part of our objective when we looked at Arlington High and what we had Jonathan and VLK do is really help us. We've talked a lot about how we've master planned going forward, not just looking at this bond, but trying to foresee what we might do in the next and the one after that. And Arlington High being one of our oldest schools, and a high school at that, it's hard to just raise a high school and start over like we do with an elementary school. So typically our architects will repurpose, we'll tear down wings, and we'll replace. And so we really tried to look at what do we need to do now in this particular bond to set us up for a phase 2, and then possibly even a phase 3, in another bond. And so I'll just kind of give you a little sneak peek into what we thought and what we presented with Dr. Cavazos was, we went ahead and designed so that we could make sure that the things that we did in this bond married well with what we might do in phase 2 and those connectors to those other wings. And then also, we know that B Hall and C Hall the classrooms are woefully undersized. And so this sets us up well to come into another bond, a future bond, and address that south end of the building, tie in those to the D and E wings, and then also potentially take down B and C and create a 3-story new B Hall, if you will. And then now with what Jonathan's done here and with the planning we've done, then all those levels become fewer, and we have a much smoother transition through the campus, both from an east-west standpoint, but we then accomplished 2 north-south corridors that are significantly wider. So all this was done with an eye towards how do we fix Arlington High long-term. And then there's some other site considerations with something like that, where if we can take 2 wings, B and C, down and create 1 wing more towards that center. Then I end up with the possibility of a connector around the building to relieve the traffic that you've talked a lot about tonight. So, but all these are significant steps and significant dollars, so we kind of have to bite this, take pieces out of this apple one at a time. So that's really the eye that it's a big puzzle, but we've really set ourselves up nicely with this plan for long-term success at Arlington High, and they're slowly and very purposefully renovate and replace older portions of the building.
Thanks. So I think the overarching point that I'm working towards here is my concern with this connectivity piece is it sounds like this is a focal point of concern, not in a negative sense, but there's a big traffic jam that's caused by not having this component of the project put in now, and I'm worried that we're gonna add another 1,000 students with the gun cohort coming up. And so we're gonna add 1,000 students to a flow pattern that we already know is problematic, and we're not gonna address this potentially until another bond, which we've been doing bonds, but I don't know how far that is in the future, and then when that project gets put, phased in terms of the implementation. And so my worry is that we already have a potential problem that seems to, from this chart, have a relatively easy fix that it looks like we were going to fix it, and then we've pulled this out, and we know we're gonna add 1,000 more kids. So what would the cost be of putting this back in? Because to me, there's the opportunity cost of making an existing problem worse for potentially another 10 years.
But I guess first and foremost, we wouldn't necessarily load this area any more than we already do today, because the bulk of the student load that we're adding will be served by what's a comprehensive new wing. And to kind of give you an idea or some scale that we're talking about, while it's 3 stories, we're essentially adding an entire, it's the size of an elementary school, a full elementary school in that one corner. So, and then further on the complexity, it's easy now for us we kind of know that it can be done, but the complexity of making that connection is significant. It's very large. And so the cost of doing something like that would likely, I don't know if I'd say double, Jonathan, probably at least 2/3 of the cost of what we're spending on the first, we would have to spend again just to make that connection. It's a very significant amount of work that would have to take place. And that part of the building especially has a very complex number of levels that we tried to set ourselves up for how we solve that. But this first connection really is that first big stepping stone. It's if we equate it to like what we did with East Arlington, everything is just a building process,
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So what is the estimated cost of the component that we're talking about?
Let me just say one thing, because we had a lot of discussion. I want to make sure we're calibrating the discussion. The first point, I think, is the distribution of students is an important piece of this, because that's what's happening right now. So while it is an issue and has been for a long time and it's managed and all this, yes, it would be ideal to not have that, but it exists. But the distribution of student has helped that. That's part of the design. The other thing that I think is important to note is that it's not just fixing that. That would have been part of the classroom connection, classroom addition. So it's kind of like like a balloon, I don't know, but you would lose something of the distribution to try to get everybody in to that part of the building.
Right.
So just another way to frame it, that's what they've been contemplating, and is, do you distribute the students to new addition, like you see here?
Right.
Or do you try to fix some of this connection, but keep the distribution in there and not go distributing somewhere else? If you do both, then I think what you're gonna end up is a lot of excess. Something has to give with classrooms, because that was intended to then be the big construction project for Arlington High, was to fix that and make that the core.
Right.
Am I close on that? Because you've had a lot of discussion about that. I just wanna make sure we're calibrated.
No, you've said it well. It's balloon is a good example. Jello is the less dignified version. It's squeezing it and it goes somewhere else. Right now, it's all here. That square footage came all the way back, and like I said, it involved connecting 5 different buildings with multiple levels. So it's not a matter of
just to be
that
clear,
one
I'm
piece.
only talking about this sort of Tetris piece that is outlined with dots.
This little piece right
No,
here.
to the right.
That's outdoor canopy. That's all
Okay, so
outdoor
are you,
canopy.
so maybe I was, maybe I'm confused. We were not talking about putting, I don't have a pointer, but that is not meant to have been an enclosed space?
It would have, to Dr. Cavasso's point, it would have been demolished entirely and replaced with a lot of the square footage that you're seeing up here as a connector piece. It wasn't just about building a connector, it was the whole building kind of came back and connected between them all.
I see what you're saying. So there is
It
no.
wasn't a separate project in itself, it was a part of the addition.
Okay, so that's what I'm confused about, because when Mr. Horn said that putting this in would be 2/3 of the cost of what's going on in the northeast part of the building, I was a bit concerned that we were saying that essentially putting in this little, what I thought was
Yes,
a little
yeah.
connector was gonna be $40 million, and I was a little concerned.
No, understand, no. Sorry, no, it's a completely different project where that square footage becomes this square footage.
Right,
Okay.
and is essentially, you've said it, just, that's what was contemplated for a long time, was do you invest in this core and try to fix those things, demo new classrooms, and really not achieve a new entrance and
Okay.
or do you distribute the students?
Correct.
All right, so I'm not asking, to be clear, I'm not asking, because I've never seen that proposal, okay? So I'm not asking to resurrect that proposal, move the building back off Cooper, redo this core. All I'm asking, is there a cost-efficient way that we can connect those corridors where the canopy is, it looks like now, to take care of that bottleneck? Because I understand Dr. Cavasso's distribution point, and the plan is for the new extra 1,000 kids to mainly be where the addition is now. But it's not gonna, I mean, it's just not gonna work like that in practice. They may be there some of the time, but we are increasing, we're putting 1,000 kids into the building. And so, for example, we're also moving the band and the orchestra hall and everything else. So this is gonna affect the flow of students within the building, and we may have more kids going through that bottleneck because they might not have been going through there when these places were located in different spots, but now they are. And also, we just can't control the whims of counselors and where teachers get moved around, and it may very well be that, some of the new kids end up with classes in the two buildings in the south. So my question is it sounds like we have a big bottleneck that's already concerned, we're adding more students. Is there a cost-efficient way to connect those hallways to help with that flow problem that we already know is a problem? Because I would prefer to address that now if we can do so in a cost-efficient way than kicking that can for 10 years.
At this point, the structural elements we'd have to put in place to make that happen would be a significant cost and would absolutely bring us well over our budget in what we have available to spend on the project. So that's part of our challenge right now, is to make sure that we accomplish what we need to accomplish, but then also keep it in budget because we're challenged right now with so many things that you see in our economy and prices escalating. And so that is a significant structural element that we would add, so.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just to be clear, the distribution of students is really all the students, not just the fine arts students.
Right.
It's anybody who's taking orchestra or going to the library. So it's all the distribution of the whole population. But to your point, Mr. Chapa, that was something that, it kind of boiled down to, do we try to fix all this and keep the core and then really not, expand the building too much and stuff.
Yeah.
So I just credit the architects because they've done,
Yeah.
this is a challenging project and with a lot of input and to try to get this as close to functional. And then future master plan, which we ask all the time, as best as possible, what's the next step if we ever go to next steps.
Certainly. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa and Dr. Cavazos. If you could go to the slide, the view from West Park Row. Okay, and then go to the one right before that one. Okay, the one after that. Okay, there we go. So the little cubby part right there next to the windows, yes. Does that go all the way through?
No, it's just recessed. You're seeing kind of the limit of it. It's just a recess.
Okay. Was there no function that we could have for that space?
Well, we could add classrooms, but right now we're at our classroom count, so.
Okay. Okay. All right. It just looks like maybe a space for birds and trash and,
I'm gonna show this recording to a certain member of my team. We're having
Okay.
a conversation. I shouldn't say that in open session, but thank you, Ms. Mays.
yes, Dr.
Well, I was just gonna say, you may want to give a perspective of how far that recess is. I mean, it
So
may be.
you're kind of seeing the limit of the image, not even the full classroom depth. So it's a double-loaded classroom hallway upstairs. And so you've got a hallway with a classroom on each side. That recess doesn't even go the full depth of one of those classrooms. So I would say it's probably about 15 feet in. You're kind of seeing the limits of the recess there. So I still have corridor, and I still have, I have some ancillary functions like mechanical spaces that would be off that corridor there. So there is some use there. It's just not the full length. What you're seeing on the north face are science rooms, which are longer. So I'm using a little bit of that frontage piece for kind of core support pieces. But the science rooms project naturally a little bit longer than that because they run, they're 1,400 versus a 700, 800 square foot classroom.
Okay. Okay, we'll keep it clean. Okay. Mr. Chapa?
Sorry, I did have one more question that was off of Mr. Hawk's question about parking. Parking is at a premium at this campus, and with the new students showing up and eventually matriculating through, do we know how many parking spaces this campus has compared to other campuses with similar enrollment?
We know what the count is, and this is the beginning of the conversation with the city too, because they've already begun down this path. I would say during an average school day, it is all of our experience that the student parking lot, while not convenient, has ample parking spaces at the moment.
Okay.
So the city's already asked us to do a count, to do a classroom count, and we're gonna start beginning that, my favorite discussion, to talking about parking with city as well. So we'll keep you advised of that. Off the top of my head, I still have all the numbers from Martin High School because of Class B memorized, but I don't know what our parking count here is just yet.
Okay. And on the staff side, is there room for staff parking? Because we'll have additional staff members coming in too now.
So we'll still have this zone dedicated to staff, and frankly, as we've talked about, we may have to expand this area as well to make sure that we have room for front office staff as well as visitors. So just operationally, I think Ms. Humbles would still prefer to keep the majority of the staff kind of on the Cooper side of the building, but there maybe need to shift some so they can stay close to the building on the south side, and more student spaces would be allocated out to the west so that they can walk.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Mays. I think my colleagues have asked just about all the questions that I had. So great minds think alike. Yeah, parking, it's always going to be the question for sure. In response to that open space on the north side of the office area, this is a Fine Arts Dual Language Academy addition, so we could commission our students to erect a bronze cult and have it illuminated or something like that. So, versus just pigeons collecting in a dusty area. So something to consider. I'm not really joking about that.
There's that space, and I've actually asked my team to come up with whether it's graphics that make that space three-dimensional, whether they're wall-applied graphics or something to go with it. So, again, we're schematic, but I'll take note of what you're saying. I actually see some merit in what you're saying.
Yeah, I think
We can at least plan.
everybody would love with a giant cult there, and then around the corner, the big horseshoes.
Booker T. Washington has their Pegasus. They've had it forever,
That's right.
So,
That's right. So, I guess we can, I don't know, I guess you have a better image where it highlights a schematic.
are we looking for floor plan?
Yeah, that's good enough. So, I was curious, I know you said that there's probably no working with the city or COG on getting any type of improvements off of Cooper, like a curb, a lane in, which is what I'm thinking when you're saying there's probably no hope there. Part of that is probably, but refresh my brain, I mean, I know we've got the light right there, but as far as overhead lines, there's a lot of utilities that are right there, which is probably the main deal killer there, correct?
Well, and, anything is possible with
Sure.
time and money.
Right.
Kelly loves for me to say that in public, but time and money. And I wouldn't rule anything out. What I'd like as first stance is if we can make existing curb cuts work and satisfy whatever this city has for queuing. For us, it's not even about, it's really proximity to an intersection. Because you've got a decel lane on West Park Road that says you're not getting any closer than that decel lane. That's a controlled dimension. Cooper's the same thing. Cooper's 40 mile an hour, so typically an offset from an intersection like that's gonna be 300 feet, which is kind of about where our closest curb cut is. So nothing's impossible, but it appears now that everything is set at what I would normally expect the limits to be. And as far as a decel or a turnout lane, I suppose it's possible, just haven't had that conversation at the moment.
Okay.
And that could help you queue a bit if that's what you're getting at, but we will be tying back to it. Most of the utilities are back in Cooper, so
Yeah.
power will be pulled back, gas is off of West Park Row, water. So we'll be getting into a lot of those utilities anyway.
Yeah, that's gonna be too much cost, I'm sure. So if we could look at one of the aerial mock-ups that you've got, yeah, that one is good. So, and it was interesting that you brought up Lamar, and of course I was on the Viking and etched glass, but with this picture, one of the things that you mentioned was having that area to the south of the office admin area be a kind of a congregation point for students. And we know what it's like on Park Row, as you mentioned already. So I am wondering and I like it from the aesthetic standpoint where you've got the mock-up of the grass and the boulders right off of Cooper. Are we at all concerned that the students are going to migrate from Park Row and, oh, these are cool boulders to sit on right on Cooper Street? Do we need to do something a little bit different with that design? And then the second part is on the congregation space out front near the office area. If you recall with Lamar, we had a similar type of concern, and we put the wall and you know, it's offset from Lamar Boulevard, but then we have that screening wall, and so it's really kind of a separation of space as far as from a security standpoint. I just don't like the opportunity for the students to get A, too close to the road, and B, too close for unwanted guests that are right there on Cooper Street interacting with our students.
To speak to the boulders for a moment, a bit of that is my rendering crew taking liberties and deciding to plant boulders. A certain person in the room keeps calling them tree stumps, but I'll say I've turned my landscape designer loose, and I'm using one who has a particular set of skills on this one, who I challenge with, I need indestructible landscape that's easy to maintain. And she loves when I say that, but that's what she's working on now. So this is purely our theoretical at the moment.
Okay.
I'll take all that input to Ann, and she's just fantastic at landscaping. So, because the other challenge is, the West Park Row side is the north face of the building. So not a lot wants to grow on the north face of the building where there is no, other than live oak trees, which then kill everything else out and the kids help them out. So we still have to go through a great deal on the landscaping side of things. I think by taking the plaza along West Park and starting to slope it down, that we give one, right now they tend to congregate, speaking like they're a flock of birds, but the students tend to congregate kind of at that top patio and then down along West Park Row. The hope is, again, architecture can't shape behavior, but we could try, is to start to spread that more where it pulls them, because right now they get fairly close to West Park Row and then they just walk out into traffic. So the goal is to give them more space along there so that they can disseminate more across the front of there. Hard to predict, but I don't know that there's enough drive to go all the way to Cooper, because most of those kids are leaving the building. Some are actually getting food in the cafeteria, we've watched. They leave the cafeteria and walk all the way down to this end of the building, and at some point they've got to stop, even if I have a plaza around the corner. So again, as we talk about landscape, we're gonna have to kind of walk through some of this. And Stacy also has some very specific thoughts on how she'd like to handle lunchtime specifically, and how this can encourage or discourage whatever she wants to do. We're very preliminary with her on this, so let us work on that. We'll keep you updated on what that might look like. It's a good point.
And what about the screening? I mean, it's a decent offset distance from Cooper Street, but any thoughts to screening of students on that front side, on the Cooper side?
And what do you think, when you say screening, what would you?
So like with the sign right now, I thought, okay, that's good. I don't know what elevation, what height that is, but that's a decent.
It's pretty low. I mean, it's more of a visual thing. It's not intended to be much more than a visual indicator of the campus. It's
Okay.
certainly not. I think as rendered, it's probably standing 3 feet tall or 4 feet tall. Essentially, it serves as our parking screening also, because we're
Right.
required to screen that parking.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what I was thinking, that, you know, with Lamar, it's essentially the same thing, but the elevation is different on the other side of that wall.
Yes.
It's down.
It's, yeah.
So it creates
tremendous
that barrier. So I'm just looking for that kind of a barrier. And, you know, it's Lamar Boulevard at Lamar High School. That is no Cooper Street. Cooper Street, the volume and the potential for unwanted guests or people driving by doing something, I just think it's a greater risk exposure.
We're definitely
So,
closer than we have been, because the Shell station's always been the buffer.
Right.
That's duly noted. So
Yeah.
as we start looking at hardscape and landscape, there may have to be kind of an accommodation there to at least, you know, territoriality is the first thing about site security, right? You need to mark what's yours, mainly for visitors, so they know what the limits are.
Yeah.
So we'll pay attention to.
You can always do another, make it a little bit taller of a wall, and there's another couple of horseshoes for you.
I was gonna say, I'm envisioning a horseshoe or a sculpture there by the time we're done, another horse sculpture.
Oh, very good. I appreciate it. It's a great design. Obviously, there's still work to go, but
A bit.
I agree with Mr. Chapa talking, you know, just the discussion about that choke point. And I understand the redistribution of individuals and the traffic flow. I guess the only question I have related to that is with that, what now is a covered canopy area, I mean, that's part of the choke point that we're talking about, correct?
It is
So-
not, and I'm sorry, I think I led you guys down the path, because
Okay.
what campus does not encourage now is students using that canopy, because that means they're actually
They're
leaving the
outside.
building envelope.
Right,
In
right.
fact, part of that canopy area has been creatively retrofitted for a storage area over the years. It's kind of tucked between, and I'm going to, again, creatively retrofit it to be a mechanical room. So really, that space between those buildings has primarily been used for maintenance access.
Right.
This is actually fenced off with a maintenance gate.
Right.
And this area specifically has been enclosed. It's all under roof, and a combination of fine arts and others use it for storage. So these canopies are still here, but at least, I know with Dr. Dalla, he didn't encourage this, and I believe Stacy as well. They don't encourage students to use this because this door is locked. The D&E doors are locked, so if they leave the gym, this is really just the connector between the original gym, that's the 58 gym, and the A gym. All that's in here is, you know, core athletics. If they come out of here, they should not be able to get in those doors unless one of their classmates lets them in. So that's not the choke. It's literally this piece right here. And as
Okay.
I said, there's no second floor. The real issue is there's not a second floor connection. So the complexity of it is not about resolving the first floor. It's if you were going to the second floor of this building, from the second floor of this building, you first come down this stair, you come through this point, and then have to go. So it's just, you've got double the load in there that you normally would, because if you had a second floor hallway, well, that's part of how D was added.
Yeah.
There's no just busting through a wall to get there. There's literally a gap between a 1958 portion of the building and a 1987 portion of the building that
Right.
was in no way intended to connect on a second floor.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So I misspoke, if that's where I was leading you guys. It's here and not the
Okay.
outdoor canopy area.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to see how this thing progresses forward. I'm excited for the students. It's always a concern when we're adding that many bodies into a campus, and yeah, we'll see what happens with the distribution. As long as it's not something that, as Mr. Chop was talking about, we're looking at 10 years down the road of an increased issue, which may, I mean, it could come into a safety issue. I'd be a little bit concerned there. So I don't know if there's some, I don't know. I'm a little bit uneasy about that myself. And I'm, again, going back to Lamar, we had a lot of those issues with Lamar. That's why we have that big hallway.
Big hallway,
Yeah,
yeah.
so, okay, well, thank you for all the work on it, and yeah, this ultimately is going to be a great thing for the students, for all the students attending.
I hope so.
Okay. Mr. Hogg?
Thank you, Jonathan. Ms. Mays, I'd love to make a motion. I move to approve the schematic design for Arlington High School for the Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy as presented by VLK architects and staff tonight.
Right, I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Hogg, a second by Mrs. Fowler. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Motion passes. Our second discussion item is consider the design development drawings for Bailey Junior High School. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. Again, this evening, we bring for your consideration, design development drawings for Bailey Junior High School. So this will be equally exciting. So I'll ask Kelly to introduce our architect and bring them forward.
Certainly, thank you, sir. The only difference here is we're slightly more advanced, so that's why the term design development. So we're still at that point, though, where we can make some changes based on comments that we might hear. So, but without going too much further, I know this is an exciting rendering here, so I'm going to invite Tom McCarty to come up with LBL Architects, and he's been working on this quite some time. Tom's been chomping at the bit to design this Bailey project since we first put out for an RFQ. So I know he's excited, and I'm not going to steal his thunder, so come on up, Tom.
Okay, appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce Trey, so I'll let you do
That's all right. That's good. No, President Mays, Dr. Cavazos, the rest of the board, appreciate time up here tonight. I did bring a few of our folks that are really putting the time into it. You know, I kind of wave my hand, say, here's the vision, but they really put the hours in and make it come true. And then I go, oh, well, let's try this now. Let's try this now. But Trey Thrush, and then there's an Alan Escato back here also. Both individuals always like to promote the AISD talent, and they're both from the system. So, all right, well, good. Let's kind of get started. Yeah, we have our three-dimensional rendering that gets everybody talking about it and the excitement and the colors, but we do want to go through and hit a few key points. It's always important to bring us back to where we started. And on this particular project, when you look back to the bond and everything, it had the priorities, conditions. So we've got the HVAC and electrical and all those inputs that need to be done. Improvements to the facility, ADA throughout wherever it's needed will be taken care of. And then paving improvements. And one of the things that's interesting, we looked at paving a little bit different than just fixing potholes and making that better. From a school programming aspect, it was identified out to the public. This would be a classroom addition. We do have the numbers. We'll tell you about those here in a moment. We do and take those portables that are out there on the property. They're no longer going to be out there. Right size the facility for the student body. Have a new administrative suite. There is no real identifiable administrative suite at Bailey. The kitchen and cafeteria is part of the addition here and get it right-sized. And then we have some athletic improvements. Again, older facility, 50 years, so lockers need to be taken care of. Some of the aspects of those. Not major improvements, but touch them up and bring them up into a contemporary setting a little bit better. And then also identifies making sure that we have field concessions. From the safety and security aspect, this project does have a tornado storm shelter included with it in the design, secure vestibule and public facing. So you'll see how the entrance will be definitely identifiable. Take care of some circulation where students, you're all familiar with the building, I presume. There's a courtyard and a lot of circulation where students have to go outside and then back inside just to get to the cafeteria, to the gyms. And with the freeze last year, it was very noticeable how that, and even just now when it gets cold and, kids that are trying to take their, get from one place to the other and it's cold, we want to get that taken care of as part of this project. And then one of the things that we did is taking care of some on-site bus loading, and you'll see how we solve that one. Talking about the site plan, so just get you oriented a little bit. North is up. On the bottom of the drawing here, we've got our, let's see, Winewood, I think I got this thing. Yeah, I might need my technology help here. Trey? Thank you. My pointer, there we go. Okay, good deal. All right, Winewood on the south side, and then the major road, Bowen over here. And with the site plan, we've got our existing building of about 120,000 square feet. The red indicates new air-conditioned square footage to the building, with most of it being actually new construction, structure, roof, and such. But we do try and take advantage of some of the situations where there's already a foundation, there's already a roof, and then we put some walls around there to enclose it and get you some more air-conditioned and improved space. The gray here on this side and on this side are paving improvements. Through the paving improvements, we're going to solve, we feel, or greatly improve the queuing and drive-through situation in the parking. So we're going to increase the on-campus parking by 200% here. Right now, if anybody's familiar with this facility, everybody kind of just queues up down the street as much as they can. It's very narrow lanes. The parking lot's very narrow. And this is one of the things we actually, just by being out there on the site and studying it. Now, I've driven by for 20 years, so I've known this. But we actually have some heat maps and what actually happens during drop-off, during pickup, and where are the clog points on this campus. And one of the things was there's not sufficient queuing. So we're not just fixing potholes and getting a little bit more parking spaces. We want to really fix the circulation, the drop-off pickup situation at this campus. And one of the other things that we noticed while we're out there is because of the narrow lanes and the difficulty to get in, you may be aware that the buses park along Winewood. Well, but by them parking along Winewood, they actually contribute to the slow-moving traffic out here and create part of that bottleneck. So we propose to improve the turnaround or the looping lane that's off of Bowen so that way buses can get in here, they can be staged after school, students can come directly on out, load onto the buses, and then those buses can get onto Cooper Street. And the way that they can get onto Cooper Street, you've got a controlled light right here. It'll be much better for them to be able to get out and then out of the flow of all of the parents trying to pick up kids. That'll also, again, have more of our parents circulating on this side. So just in the site plan thinking and improvements, that was a big move for us. And then you also notice in the site plan and thinking that we're making an identifiable entrance to the building. This arrow right here, everybody will inherently learn that this is the parking lot, this is the main entrance to the school. And again, when we go through some closer diagrams, you'll get that sense. From this parking lot, people will be very identifiable to the sports field, to the back, to the gyms. So we want to solve more than just adding classrooms here. We want to solve something that we've recognized at this campus for quite some while. First floor, thinking about this and plans and where actually is the work going to occur. So we use this shading technique to help with that. So the existing building where there's no work being done is just left with this white color. So there's some minor things, maybe sound or something would be in the gym B, or the competition gym to the north, and then some of the fine arts. But otherwise, most of the campus is getting some type of freshen up, lighting, ceiling. So if we're going to give it a new look throughout, again, all with this, again, how much funds can be utilized to do that, but it is contemplated to give the building a good fresh look. The dark red are actually the addition areas, and I'll start at the top right up here with this dark red being the kitchen addition. And the way we plan to approach this is the new kitchen spaces, it has a lot of the utilities, it has a lot of the electrical and plumbing infrastructure and everything, is built outside the existing footprint of the building. The existing kitchen is this peach color right here. And so by doing so, this work can be started while there's still school going on. Once this gets completed, the peach area can be turned into the servery. Again, sequencing of work to make it happen, but then that way, it can go on and get started as quickly as possible and not disrupt the student environment as much. Another big red piece here is our first floor addition with 10 classrooms in this block right here. And within this block, and we can look at this a little bit closer, we want to provide some better circulation to get to key points within the school, primarily the cafetorium for after hours. And then just also out to our new drop-off pickup area. There'll be 3 points that students can go out there to get from the main block of the classrooms out to the drop-off pickup. But again, we've identified that this would be a new main entrance point. Here's an administration suite. Now, administration suite was not really kind of the first identifiable thing, but as we looked through the project and realized, you know, administration's right here in the middle, and they still need some more classrooms and stuff, but they were also fragmented. They were using other spaces and around. The idea is that, well, these spaces are perfect to be converted to classrooms. They're right there. They're the right size as the other adjacencies. And so therefore, those can be now classroom spaces, and we can take and consolidate more of the administrative functions together on the east side of the building, where the new parking is, where the new drive is. And it all started to make sense and flow together in those regards. We do plan to capture some of those areas that have a cover or have a roof, have a foundation. On the Bowen Street side, we would put some support spaces under here. We can also, this will be reclad, so we can give it a new fresh look out on that Bowen Street side. And then enclosing that courtyard that's here. So now those band kids that would have to take their instruments from here all the way to another location, they're now indoors. So this all occurs on the first floor. And again, in the major other renovation areas, freshen up the cafetorium, some work in the gyms, take care of some lockers. All right. Second floor, programming aspects. We do have, this is our second floor plate right here. We are converting some classrooms to provide an additional science room up on the second floor. These are all science in the center here, and they need one more science room, so we've accommodated that. And then this also gets a little bit more about how we accomplish the additional classrooms. Again, the program that was given to us was for 10. We were asked to see how there's some additional capacity could be created within the school to go beyond the 10. So on this right-hand side, we've got new classrooms, 9 here, a 10th one here, and then 4 more. So again, with the 900 students that are there, plus some additional classrooms, you'll be able to increase the student body if you needed to over time. This red dash line that goes on around here identifies the limits of the storm shelter. Without a really large space, no band space, no gym or anything, we've had to become creative. How do we accommodate a storm shelter in this? So this block of classrooms is, and we've done this before on other schools, the ideal situation. It's also oriented on the opposite side of most tornadoes tend to come from the southwest, so this has almost kind of got a natural protective nature to it. Let's see here. I think I covered everything there. Secure entry point right here, and then our admin suite. Zooming in just a little bit closer, and I think I've really talked pretty much about this, other than with our kitchen addition that would be on this backside. We also are incorporating the concession stands. It's the closest place to the outdoor fields. It makes sense to us. You've already got your plumbing. You've already got, you know, all these features. And again, with the consolidation of the construction, rather than now have to go and build another little outdoor concession stand. So trying to be respectful to the taxpayer dollar here. And then, again, we'll have to have some infrastructure expansion as well to support the kitchen and some of the other spaces. But this particular drawing really helps to show this, what we call after hours entry point. And it'll come more clear on the three-dimensional, but we can have a corridor that kind of goes now to this new main parking lot that comes on this direction. And by doing a little bit of renovation right here, we can make our way into the cafetorium where there's plenty of performances that occur at this school. After hours, you don't have to let people come completely through the whole school, and it can be corded off. And then it just really made sense to us. This move kind of came by the idea of the little diagonal rotation of the whole plan, and it provided this nice opportunity. There is It was picked up that in this area might have some mechanical yard, it's on the backside near a kitchen and everything. This particular line represents a screening wall that'll come on out, so you won't see any of that infrastructure through this project. Again, some of the athletics improvements, we're looking at getting the lockers replaced in both the boys and the girls' locker rooms. We've got some scoreboard, we've got some mechanical aspects to the gym the original gym that looked at to be taken care of with this. But the competition gym on the north side, again, bleachers were all in good shape. We looked at those. The bleachers here were also in good shape, so those aren't necessarily on the list to take care of at the moment. We'll call it inspirational imagery. How do we want the feelings to transfer across to the students? We want to make sure it's fresh, bright. We're bringing that pride of the Bailey High and any other facilities that are within the AISD district. Now some more three-dimensional looks and appearances. So from the south, if you were standing at the residence on Winewood Drive and you're looking north, you would see the administrative piece right here. The main entrance is off here to the right where the parking lot is. This block right here, the playful colors that represent the school would be more of the office area. We do have some natural light that would get in. The glassed-in area is more group conference room type settings, planning session areas, so that there's, again, a nice appearance to the south side of the building. We do have some, natural landscaping. We have flag poles, all these things that help identify this as now being the front entrance to the school. If you were in the parking lot and you're looking back towards the west, again, very identifiable front door, secure entry, admin suite where you check on in. This brick section right here would be the classroom block, let's call it. Again, this brick would match the rest of the other building to be continuous. And again, help to highlight that this is the entry point to the school. We do have some windows to the classrooms that we can. Again, even it's a challenge with the tornado storm shelter aspect, but we can have windows and we can intend to have solar tubes also for any of the interior type classroom areas. And then every entry point kind of has this little canopy appearance and identifiable. And one of the ones that, again, this helps to really kind of get the sense, bird's eye view from the high parking lot area, or if you imagine that you're where the portables are and that now you're up 100 feet in the air. So main entry to the school, secondary entrance and exit point for students, and then that after hours to the cafeteria right here. So we think we've solved a lot of things that are programmatic that may have not been really identifiable, but when you really study the campus and the flow and how it relates to the parking, we're excited about how we can solve all that and provide the additional classrooms that we're kind of spurred this project on. In terms of a project schedule, we see this as substantially complete, fall of 23. So it's at least over a year project. And we're working hard to get to the finish line in the drawings, get it out to bid. And again, like Jonathan brought up, my counterpart, everybody likes to see the nighttime view. So one of these days, we hope we have to drive by and see the lights. So, all right. And now we do have, Frank's going to run something for us here, I believe. My folks went through and, again, still shots are nice, but a little video is also kind of nice just to get that full sense. Now would be, again, kind of the look of the main entry. As you can see how it's angled, so it gets out beyond the face of the rest of the building on the south side. So if you're coming from Bowen Street from that intersection, very identifiable. You see the red, you see the flagpoles, you go, I want to go to that location down there. You find the parking lot, you go, okay, here's where I park, and there's my main entrance. The grass.
The grass under those lines.
Yes, the grass. You know what? That's a challenge, isn't it?
It is forever there.
we did look at trying, in the last project, trimming those up a little bit more. Might need to get them up just a little bit more too. But, yes, those live oaks just take up, they're a challenge. I'm done.
Is that it? Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. Do I have any questions from trustees? Mrs. Fowler?
Thank you, President Mays. No questions, but just comments. I love the after-hours entry, because if they come in through the front, you don't know where people are gonna go in the school. So I think that was really smart to put in that after-hours entry, so we appreciate that. And I like that the kids are not gonna be outside, not only for the cold weather, but for rain. You know, from one building to a next and coming in and out. And of course, I'm thrilled that we're getting rid of the portables. My first couple of years of teaching, I was in a portable building, and they're hot, they're cold, metal tops, and when it rains, you can't hear each other, and it's a safety issue as well, you know, and they don't know what's going on in the main building, and they're out there, and so I think it's a safety issue, so I'm so glad that we're getting rid of those portables.
And on the safety, one of the things that, again, looking at the campus and how it really is now, you know, we really feel by moving that entry point to away from the Bowen intersection side and everything, it's really, it's a big safety item. You know.
Because like you, I've driven up and down that Bowen area, and kids are running and cars are trying to get in, and it can be terrible.
Oh, yes.
So I think that's gonna be wonderful.
All right.
Great
Thank you.
work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. Mrs. McMurray?
I concur with Ms. Fowler. That's the first thing I was gonna say. I love that additional entrance, because looking at current Bailey, you know, it's very much, you know, you go in this way and then you find your way, right? So this is going to be very accessible. I like how you have the additional canopies around and it's consistent throughout. I think that on the schematic design, it really complements the current building really well. And it just looks awesome. The exterior is beautiful. Can you go back to the picture with the interior, the 6 interior images with the carpet and?
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes, it says inspirational imagery.
Inspirational, yes.
Yes. So in that bottom middle picture, is that whiteboard walls that
Yeah.
kind of go like
Yes.
serve as doors? Can you kind of talk about the purpose of that and the functionality of that?
Well, one of the things, and we learned this at the early college, high school, you know, you give the students enough area to be creative, those, we call them convertible classrooms that were over in that facility, then they would find ways to use and explore their ideas on the spot. And we just see that as the progression in education and the idea that you get a group of folks together. Maybe I see this a lot more in design schools, but I think it's just carrying its way over into normal. You know, get a group of folks together, you know, get your ideas down on paper, you hit it with your phone, and then erase and take it away. But I think it really has started from the early college and bringing that higher ed thinking all the way down to even a junior high setting.
And I was going to say, I know that the caption says this is a conference room, but if opportunities, you know, present themselves to add that feature to the classrooms, I think that that would really be something we want to jump on. Because, you know, if a teacher wants to keep something that the students have done or that she's written up on one of the boards, instead of having to erase it to make room for something else, you can simply slide this over and then have the, you know, the other one on top. So I know this is a conference room schematic, but if that opportunity presents itself in the new classrooms, if that's not a big cost difference, that might be something that we pursue. Another question about these pictures. So I don't know if you've gotten feedback about this. That's a very striking red. And I understand we're trying to keep with the Bailey branding. I guess I really like how the carpet looks. The gray kind of mutes it down a little bit. Has there been any conversation about maybe perhaps a more muted red, or is this kind of where we're headed?
Oh, no, this is all negotiable.
Okay.
In terms of
Have you gotten any feedback about the color itself?
I know red has been talked about a lot, and really which red, you know, it needs to be.
Yeah.
There's precedent to that.
Well, and my first thought was just, it's a school color, but a whole classroom, all four
Yeah.
walls, that striking red, that's just something to think about. That's just my personal opinion. I don't. It is. It is.
Bring it down. Bring it
Just
down.
something to think about. I like the
Yes.
balance of reds and grays, maybe
Yeah.
an accent wall,
Yeah.
with red, but all four walls, that bright red.
Oh, yeah, no,
you know,
when-
something to think about.
No.
Go bold or go home.
Okay. But everything looks great. Thank you for all your hard work. I'm really excited. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mrs. McMurray. Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Mays, and just make sure you get Ms. McMurray on as a design consultant on the colorization. Now, great comments. I just want to say, really, just to reiterate what you said, great work on solving a lot of issues that have been there for a long time, not just increasing and right-sizing the different elements, including, which I don't think you mentioned, and I don't know that my colleagues that weren't part of the committee are aware, this also includes a storm shelter, which is, I mean, obviously, we need to do that, but the way that they did it is, it's just a really good part of the design element. Yeah, you want to show us that, Tom?
Yeah, and one of the things, it's right here,
Yeah.
by even, and again, we've utilized this over in Fort Worth
They say
ISD by using some classrooms that are larger spaces. You don't have to construct your walls as tall. There's some actual pragmatic cost savings here. A lot of people like doing the gym, big volume, but then you've got to spend that money to reinforce that wall that's very, very tall. And so these classrooms afford the proper space that's needed based by the code for the tornado storm shelter. So we think it's, again, efficient use of the funds that are available, and feels right-sized.
And my colleagues are telling me that I missed that part, that you did actually say that, so I apologize.
Well, that was just for you then.
Yes.
Dr. Reich.
That's right, thanks. And the other thing that we talked about during committee, which I don't, maybe we did, I don't think we discussed during this presentation tonight, was on the, what now is kind of considered the main entrance, that front side off Bowen, that is the small changes that you're going to do there will tie in that design element and the colorization of it. So it
Yeah,
will
we
be to our public passing by, they'll notice, wow, something's going on, something's different about Bailey, and I think that's really important. Besides, to me, what is more important is the functionality, like you said, with the bus turn-in and availability there. So I just really appreciate it and look forward to what I know will be a time and budget-sensitive timeline.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. So this was a discussion action item, so I'll give an opportunity if anybody is prepared to make a motion.
Yeah, I will go ahead and do that. I move that we approve the design development drawings for Bailey Junior High as presented.
Okay, so we've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, motion by Dr. Reich, a second by Mr. Wilbanks. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank
you
you.
very much for your presentation.
Appreciate your time. I will pass on to my colleague, AHA, needs more Colts. We need some more horseshoes up there.
Okay, next on our agenda is discussion action item, COVID-19 school operations update. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, and we bring a brief COVID-19 update as the numbers continue to drop, and we'll do a brief presentation. So, Dr. Hill.
Yes, I'm back again to give a very brief presentation, and we'll get right into it. And so we'll just continue to talk about the things that we're doing to mitigate our mitigation efforts, which include vaccine opportunities at the Arlington Fire Department on 2920 South Cooper. And we've also scheduled with Tarrant County Public Health their Vax Mobile second dose clinic at Anderson and at Sam Houston, both on March 21st and March 23rd respectively. So we've got those scheduled and confirmed as of today, and we'll communicate those out. The testing, again, we're still testing at our facility at 1203 West Pioneer Parkway, and those times haven't changed. And the testing, as you'll see in a minute, has decreased tremendously. The need is nowhere where it once was. As you can see, testing at the end of the week on March 4th, you can see the numbers there and the graph showing testing is down as well as positivity is down. As far as Tarrant County data and the statistics and community spread, the community spread level is now at moderate on the county website, and all of the indicators that we've been showing over the last year has been trending down in this time. That includes 7-day average for percent positive, the virus spread, COVID-like hospitalizations, and the COVID-like illnesses. All of those are trending down, and that's consistent with what we're seeing with regard to our numbers in the district. Through March 9th, which was the end of the day yesterday, we've had over 10,000 cases within the district, 2,300 or so staff members, 7,800 or so students, and 16 visitors. And again, we still update that information every day on our website on that COVID dashboard. And that as well is trending down. You can see the week ending 3/4. You can barely see any positive cases, but and then again, as compared to some of the weeks that we weren't in for a full week. So we'll continue to monitor this and support staff and students by encouraging them to stay home if they are showing symptoms, and then continue to monitor how we can cover classes. The helping hands and that opportunity to help, we've kind of scaled that back again because the need just isn't there at this time. But if it becomes a need again, then we'll definitely kind of review that and act appropriate. So again, very brief, and if there are any questions, we'll take them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hill.
Thank
Do we
you.
have any questions, comments? Okay, see none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next thing on our agenda is our discussion item, 2021-2022 financial update. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. We bring tonight, as we do monthly, a financial update to the board. This also covers some of the consent items, but also gives you the perspective of our finances. Keeping in mind that this is one of those years where the predictability continues to be affected by disruption. And so if that's attendance, if that's funding, if that's the state not making decisions about hold harmless, all those things come into play in this variability. So I think what you'll see tonight is something you could categorize as the worst case scenario. But we do know there's some things in motion that from the state and things we're doing that could affect this. But we want to give a good, strong financial update tonight for board awareness and consideration. So Ms. Moss, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Vassos. President Mays and trustees, again, we have a very brief financial update. It's become routine for us now. This financial update will be information as of January 31st for the funds that you see there on the screen. And the financials that are in the board packet tonight, the majority of these are standard items that come every month. The two that I'll focus on tonight are the budget amendment and the fund balance commitment for universal pre-K. And so we'll start with general operating, and as Dr. Faso said, we're asking you to amend the budget tonight, and a big portion of that budget amendment is in general operating, and it's due to our attendance. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the attendance and our average daily attendance. So the Texas Education Agency has given us two adjustments as far as attendance. The first one is the change to low attendance day waiver, and basically you have to have a 10% decrease in order to get that waiver. The second one is operational minute adjustment, which is a little different too, and this is for a target percentage attendance rate, which is calculated by TEA. If we meet that attendance rate, then we would get some assistance for TEA for that first 6 weeks period. The next slide I'm going to share with you is one that our staff went to a Moat Casey webinar, and this is a sample of a hypothetical adjustment, and I'll kind of walk through that with you. The TPAR, if it's the lesser of either the average of the 4th, 5th, and 6 weeks period, which on this example is 92.5%, or the attendance rate from the first 6 weeks of 2019-20, which is 97%. In this example, the lesser would be the 92.5. So they would take that number and compare it with our first 6 weeks, which is shaded just a little differently there, and you'll see it's 86%. So in this example, the lesser would be the 86%. TEA would then use the 92.5%. And so we wanted to take that information and kind of show you how it looks for Arlington. And we kind of did the same scenario here, where you see the 19-20 average is 96.3. The last 3-6 weeks average is 89.5. So we don't know what the 5th and 6th are going to be yet, so we kind of estimated where we thought we might land. That number is subject to change, either up or down, and based on how it changes, the outcome would change. So the 89.5 in our case is the lesser of the 96.3 and 89.5. So if you compare that number to the first 6 weeks, the 90.6, then for Arlington, we really wouldn't benefit from this adjustment. So what we have in attendance is what we would have, and that's how our funding would be calculated. The general operating budget amendment that we're asking for, the major change is a $22 million decrease in revenues, which includes a $34.3 million decrease in state revenue, and that's due to the low attendance. Again, as Dr. Cavazos stated, this is basically the worst case scenario. It's the information that we have right now. It doesn't consider a hold harmless or anything else. It's just us updating it and asking you to amend the budget so that we can see where we are as far as the bottom line. And we may not know what TEA does until May, and we need to start looking at where we are and making any adjustments that are necessary. The other part of the revenue is $11.5 million in federal revenue. We increased our Medicaid based on our current projections, and then we also added ESSER indirect costs based on what we're going to spend in ESSER this year. Then there's a $10 million decrease in expenditures. That is ESSER 2 funds that we use, and we had budgeted to cover the cost to continue operations. This is just a picture of the first half of the budget amendment that you received. Again, you can see the items I talked about on the previous slide, the $34 million in state revenue, the $11 million in federal, and then the $10 million under the expenditure item. So what does that do for the bottom line? Initially, when we adopted the budget, the $12.8 million was there. We've amended the budget a couple of times already. This is amendment number 4. So that was 10.6. Tonight, what we're asking you nets to a $12 million decrease, and the proposed amended budget would have us at a $22.6 million deficit. And so we've been talking too about the impact of our ESSER funding on the general operating budget, and we've talked about the $13.9 million. That was one of the first budget amendments that we did, which is revenue from 2021 school year. We talked about the $5.6 million reduction of budgeted expenditures. When we adopted the budget, there were $5.6 million in expenditures that we identified that could be paid with ESSER funds, so we pulled that out. Then there's a $10 million reduction of budgeted general operating that we're bringing to you tonight, the $5 million in indirect costs, and the $2 million in pre-award ESSER 2 cost. And so our work right now is to determine where we would be if we didn't have ESSER funds. And so I just built this chart to kind of give us a picture of that. And so if we start with the $22.6 million deficit that we're asking you to amend tonight, and if we put the whole harmless back in, the revenue, if we take that out, if we take ESSER 2 and 3 indirect cost out and the pre-award cost out, if we then put those expenditures back in that ESSER is covering, the 10 million and the 5.6 million, we would have a deficit budget right now of $60.3 million. So it's important for us to keep up with that. And again, it is the worst case scenario. We received information today that TEA is possibly looking at a hold harmless again. And if we did that, things would change. But it is important for us to know where we would be if we didn't have the ESSER funding. We'll move on to debt service. We're the budget amendment for that. The major changes are 11.7 million increase to revenue other resources, and a $7 million increase in debt service. This is all a result of bond sale and refunding transactions from last month. 5.1 million in sale and refunding on the debt service side, and 1.9 million in bond principal redemption. And this is just a picture of what's in your packet. Capital projects is basically the offsetting of that, where we put the $209.9 million revenue adjustments based on the 2022 bond sale, and then the offsetting expenditures were added to the budget as well. And that reflects a picture of the capital projects amendment. Our natural gas fund, we went ahead and made some adjustments there as well. We noticed that our interest earnings that we projected are decreasing a little bit, so we wanted to go ahead and adjust it. On the other hand, our royalty revenue, what we forecast, is increasing. We also adjusted our expenditures down by $58,000 for anticipated expenditures. And that's a picture of the natural gas amendment. Our food and nutrition services, the major changes here, we're looking at a $2.6 million decrease in local revenue. That's because we're offering free meals to all, and we're not generating that income that we typically would have. When we adopted the budget, we adopted it without that program in mind. And then the offset to that is we increased $4.8 million in federal program revenue as a result of the reimbursement rate changing. So that's a look at that one, where we initially adopted a deficit, and we're now at a $1.9 million surplus in food services. The other item I wanted to highlight is the fund balance for universal pre-K. Last month, the board approved the universal pre-K. We're asking you tonight to go ahead and commit those funds. 5.2 million was committed last year in June. That would be for the first year of universal pre-K. And then we asked for, requested 11 million for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. And I will be glad to answer any questions you may have.
President Mays, I'll just add very quickly that this is another, we'll call it an opportunity, but an opportunity to continue our advocacy and our relationship with state officials, because even the House Public Ed is asking for this to be a study about the hold harmless. Without going too far into the frustration side, this should have already been decided. There is no secret across the state that our attendance was impacted, not just Arlington, first 6 weeks and fourth 6 weeks. And it was drastically impacted with the spike. And everybody acknowledges it at all levels, but there's not a decision as to how the hold harmless will work. So I think that's another opportunity as we continue to engage with our elected officials, that we remind that this is an important thing to settle, because there's many challenges. This is to continue to be lingering on this one after so much discussion, just seems like last year, which is when they wouldn't decide until the very end. So just another opportunity for us to be aware. So thank you, Ms. Moss, for continuing the diligence on, hey, this is what it would look like. You know, that unfortunately, the finance side is not really paired up with the accountability side, because while they acknowledge that attendance and loss of learning and all these things, there seems to be no acknowledgement of the STAR and this sort of thing that's coming in relation to that. But this section is about finance, so we'll stick to that. And just the advocacy, I think, is important, the relationship that we have with our elected officials.
And thank you, Dr. Cavazos. One thing I did omit was we looked basically on adjusting the revenue side. There will be some adjustment to the expenditure side as well. Our payroll savings, where we have positions out there that were not filled, we will adjust those too once we get a little closer to the end.
Thank you, Mrs. Moss. Mrs. Fowler?
Thank you, President Mays. Thank you, Ms. Moss, for this. This was very good information and very well put together. Do we know whether we're going to be offering free lunch to everyone next year?
I did talk to Mr. Lewis, and he's saying right now that will not be, there will not be free lunch next year. Is that correct?
And just as a reminder, that was from the federal government. That's
Yes.
not an Arlington, you know, that was an opportunity. We will still have those campuses that everyone qualifies, and that, I think, will not change according to what David sent even today, I think. So we don't anticipate doing what we did this year, that the federal government will allow that, but that's where we are today.
So maybe we can recap some of that money?
Yes,
Because they'll be paying for their lunches?
yes.
Okay.
So
that should
it'll
help a
just
little.
probably be inverted, but yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. And just to make sure that I'm clear from her question and my voice is going for the day, the decrease in the revenue from us not charging students for their meals, the program for the federal government was still reimbursing us.
Yes,
So it's not
and-
gonna be a dollar per dollar
Right.
balance, okay?
And
just
it
wanna make
reimbursed
sure.
us at a little higher rate this year. That's why you saw the increase in our revenue.
Right. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from trustees? Okay. Mrs. Moss, thank you very much. We very much appreciate showing, as you've done here, the real numbers without some of the things that we are truly hoping for, but that we're not necessarily guaranteed at this point. So appreciate the financial update in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is our consent agenda. So our consent agenda consists of routine items grouped together for approval as one item. So unless removed from the consent agenda, these items will be acted on at one time with no discussion. Trustees, are there any requests for items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda for further discussion? Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Mays. I'd like to withdraw consent agenda item J.
Okay. Any other items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda for further discussion? Okay. Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda less item J?
Move for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So a motion by Mr. Hogg, a second by Mrs. Mamura. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Okay. All present vote in the affirmative for our consent agenda for all alphas except for J. So now we will discuss the consent items that were withdrawn, which was J, approval of change order number 1, amending the contract amount for the 2019 bond construction project for the Thornton Elementary School Replacement Project, Phase 1, bid package 7. Mr. Chapa, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, President Mays. I have some questions about this change order. Not necessarily this change order itself, but the work that is reflected in the change order. So I guess my first question would be, Mr. Horn, is the underwater stormwater drainage and detention system, is that going to remain underground with this change order, or is this going to be another massive gash in the land on our property?
Yeah, it's a good question. It will remain underground, but it will be increased in size significantly.
Okay, and who, was this something that was looked at prior to the work being done? Was there an estimate for how much drainage and retention would be needed as a result of this project?
Certainly. Our civil engineers, working through our design team, our architects and so forth, studied the amount of water that we would have leaving our site or into the city's system, and that was the basis for design. After it was sent, after the bid period that we had in place, it was also sent to the city's third-party engineer for review, and they looked at it and decided that it should be significantly greater in its capacity. And so I could explain that further if you'd like, but.
Yeah, I would.
Okay. So essentially, they designed based on a set of criteria to handle the water that would leave our site. So any impervious surface that we have, the building, the parking lot, or anything of that nature that would run water off, we're responsible for handling that, and within reason, we want to hold it for a certain amount of time and load the city's system as it can handle the water when the rain event might stop. What was asked for us to do was to consider a 100-year flood event, and then further to assume that the system would already be full, and our parking lots and everything that would hold water would be full up to the curb height. So essentially a pretty significant rain event occurring, and so we were asked to redesign the system or increase the size of the system to be able to handle all that water and hold that water for a period of time until the city system could catch up. I hope that made sense. So.
Okay, so the.
Let me see, maybe I can explain it just in real simple terms. I should have just said, when we started, we had essentially an underground pipe. Let's just call it a 6-foot pipe, a 6-foot diameter pipe underground. We've gone to essentially 3 6-foot diameter pipes underground at this point that run the periphery of the property.
And so that calculation was based off not only a 100-year rain event, but also assuming that
the system was full at the time that the 100-year rain event happened.
What would cause a scenario like that? Because that sounds like greater than a 100-year event.
As Mike Parkos, my director, calls it, that would be Noah's Ark period. It'd be pretty significant rain event. We experienced, I wouldn't say, what's that, sir?
Out by Gunn during that time.
I was about to say the same thing.
That would be one of the examples, not the Gunn project,
Right.
none of that. It's just the time period where all of that was kind of under construction for us. That was one of those events that.
That's right. That was a very significant rain event that occurred approximately 3 to 4 years ago when.
But it doesn't sound like it would be even that would not have been as significant as the estimate used for this project.
No, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so this is the estimate that we're being required to conform to is a 100-year rain event and then more.
And then more, yes.
Okay, and that was a recommendation from the city or the city's third party?
The city's third-party engineer.
Okay.
And
have we ever had any issues with flooding at Thornton prior to this?
I don't know that the school itself, I've only been here 6 years, but in my time here, even during that significant rain event that occurred 3 to 4 years ago, that was so devastating for the city of Arlington, across the city, we didn't have any flooding at Thornton at that time that would have been concerning to us, no.
Okay. And I'm trying to think about how to say this. So we don't really know what would cause a backup of the system. What would lead to that scenario? Like a Noah's Ark event, and so there's just it just holds more and more and more.
Yeah, and I probably should have said it that way, but we just have to laugh about it a little bit because it's a little bit painful because we're spending significant dollars on to essentially prepare for an event that again, it's a reason why they call it a 100-year rain event.
And this is
But,
100 year plus more.
Yeah, plus more, right. And so for it to really have an impact on us, the way that it did 3 to 4 years ago, you would have to experience significant rainfall over a period of multiple days that would saturate, number one, saturate the ground such that it could not soak up more water, and then continue to have a rain event that would fill the tributaries, Rush Creek, Johnson Creek, and so forth, in the Arlington area, and then outside of the Arlington area and surrounding cities, and
Right.
then continued rain on top of that.
So that
would
sounds
then
like, and
overload.
based on a comment you made earlier, it sounds like one reason that we are being asked to do this is because drainage systems that we don't control,
Right,
that ours feeds into, are not capable of handling the same type of event.
that is correct, sir. Here's the bottom line, no matter what
And
we
who
do on
manages
ours,
those drainage systems?
that's the city of Arlington.
Okay.
Yes. And so even as we leave the site currently with those three large diameter underground reinforced concrete pipes, they're still going into the same 18-inch outflow that we have today. So that's the reason why we're being asked really to store, is that it's woefully undersized downstream.
Okay, and then I assume that I'm assuming this project increased the amount of impervious surface at the Thornton site, right?
It's likely.
Modestly.
You said Thornton, modestly, very little. And the reason why I say that is we've gone to a two-story school, whereas we had a sprawling one-story school before. And then, but where likely we've increased slightly is the amount of driveway that we have circulating around the school, because we're trying to accommodate cars and bring cars off of Park Road Drive and Catalo and Carter.
And we were required to construct all of that extra.
Yes, sir, that's correct. It's just a part of
Those
stacking,
requirement.
to bring stacking off the roads, yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that essentially the amount of impervious surface is almost the same, but we're being asked to massively increase the drainage.
Yes, sir.
And retention on the site. Did we include any expanded drainage and retention on this site as part of the work that we were doing?
Absolutely, yes. So in our initial designs, yes.
Well, I was just gonna say, so yes, I think the short answer is yes, we did. And what happens is, and this is a long story, but it's worth the long story, I think, is what happens is the city has an outside consultant that is reviewing this and others, so I'm just gonna talk about our schools. And that outside consultant then applies certain standards, and it's where we end up. The ideal here, which is the discussion we've had with the city even recently, the ideal, maybe not, and I'll address the question as well, but the ideal is that this information is at the front end of a project, not at the back end.
Correct.
And that requires them to adjust something, not us necessarily, because we've been doing our projects the way we do them. What is the issue right now is that at the back end, it goes to the consultant.
Right.
And then the consultant has some disagreement or reviews and edits and all that, and it becomes this. The ideal, maybe not addressing, Mr. Chapa, your concern completely, but the ideal is this discussion begins at the beginning of the project, and we argue and discuss and get back and forth about, hey, what is the right drainage, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it builds into the budget. What you're considering today is a change order, because this money is not in the budget for this construction project. But the beginning of the phase would allow us to adjust the entire budget to address wherever we end up. But we need that consultant to be at the front end. So I'll give you an example, or maybe an example is what we talked about tonight with Arlington High and Bailey.
Right.
This is the time, not before tonight, because in all fairness, this comes to the board for approval. So to get too far ahead of that process doesn't really work. But now that the board approved that, this is when we need the consultant, the third-party consultant from the city and our staff and our engineer to start working on any drainage concerns, issues, and there will be.
That's right.
In all fairness, there will be. And not at the end, once we've already had plans drawn up and bids and all this other stuff.
Correct.
That's the ideal thing we're trying to get to with the city, and I think we're making good movement on that. I feel like we can get there. But that's what tonight is we're at the tail end, and there's not enough money in that budget. So I'll pause there. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions.
Well, no, I mean, I understand what a change order is for. It's just the frequency with which this occurs, and this is not the first time I've pulled a consent agenda item
Yes, sir.
to mention this, is it seems like with many of our projects, we do our due diligence on the front. This is something that comes up all the time. And then here we are approving another significant change order. And who knows, this may be the first of many if you know, precedent's any indication, where for drainage and retention alone, we end up spending significantly beyond our initial budget, which was done again with due diligence because of things that should have been anticipated on the front end, but also in many cases, and I don't know if this is one, but I'll go back to the Crow project, where it got to the point where we were even doing a drainage and retention project on city property. And I said then, and I continue to think now, and this is, you know, it seems to some extent that we are subsidizing, I know it's all taxpayer money.
Yes, sir.
We are subsidizing what are essentially city bond projects and using the ability to get in and out of our schools and get the improved from opening and getting a COA in lieu of the city doing it, we're doing it for them. And it seems really odd to me that without a big increase in impervious surface, any history of flood problems in the area, we're not only being asked to now conform to a 100-year rain event, we're going beyond that, in part because of, sounds to me like, perhaps issues with the infrastructure that is in place that we're not responsible for, and we're being asked to make up for some of that. So, you know, the city's a great partner in many respects, but I continue to not be pleased with the way that this relationship operates in this specific area, because this is happening over and over and over again. And tonight, I had a question about something I thought should have been in the Arlington High design. In the design committee for Bailey, I had a question about something, and the answer is always, well, construction costs are going up and everything else, and I get that. And the budget is tight, and we have a lot of stuff in this 19 bond project, and so our margin for error is small.
Yeah.
But because of that, you know, it irks me that we're continuing to use bond dollars that are supposed to be going for buildings for our students to subsidize infrastructure projects that I think should not be the responsibility of this governmental organization. And so, I've said that before, I'm saying it again, and people are gonna disagree with me about it and maybe say it's a bit unfair, but I'm calling it like I see it, and I'm seeing it repeatedly. And so, whatever we need to do to work with the consultant on the front end or something to get this where we're not in this position over and over again, I would appreciate. I also had some questions about the lane.
So, Mr. Chapa, can I address one thing just to make sure that, because as I understand it, not an engineer, but as I understand it, because I've had a lot of discussion with my friends at the city and Kelly and the engineers, there's certain part of that context that I think we need to clarify. The rules that they're applying, as I understand it, somebody could prove me wrong, are being applied to everybody except it applies when you're building something.
Right.
So we happen to be building, we happen to be expanding. The rules that this seems a little too much about floods and all that are being applied to everybody who's developing something in Arlington.
That's right.
And to your point, is it addressing something else? Their point is those rules are being applied, and when somebody develops something nearby, then they're gonna have to abide by that, and somebody else will have to abide by that. It's not the best situation for any kind of development, but that's a whole different story. But I don't know that we're accounting for all of the issues of the neighborhood or the area. Because if a neighborhood was being rebuilt, apparently they would have to abide by these rules that are pretty strict and costly. So much so that as I understand, there's some developments that are struggling even to develop because of this kind of cost. So,
well, that's its own separate
Right.
problem, and that is a problem. But what you're essentially saying is, well, it's painful for everyone, so maybe we shouldn't worry about it so much. But the fact that the pain is being applied at all is really the problem.
It
Whether
is.
it's to us or to everybody.
that's correct, you're absolutely right. And so what I would say is that the getting on the front end, and I want to make sure we're clear because I think this is an important point, getting on the front end of this, like tonight with Bailey and Arlington High, et cetera, is so that these strict rules can fit into a budget.
Yeah,
It's-
and
it-
that-
And
and
we're
that
gonna
would
argue
be-
about the rules and all that, but at the end of the day, that's how it was explained to me over and over, which is, everybody's gonna have to follow these rules, it's gonna cost more, and what my point is, let's avoid these change orders. Let's argue up front.
And that would be great. It's just, again, our due diligence over and over again, and our civil engineers are saying these types of changes aren't necessary. And so whether that's happening to us or lots of other people too, I think it's a problem where you have professionals in this field repeatedly saying what the parameters are and should be, and we're even doing extra drainage and retention. And then the city kicks it out to this outside consultant, whoever they might be, and consistently it's coming back with substantial changes and second guessing. That is essentially final. And I think that's a failure in whatever system is being operated. So the questions I have on the turn lanes, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the description that's here in the document. So there was a concern about turn lanes on Catalo and Park Row. We asked for the city to back off the request to add a turn lane, a left turn lane from eastbound Park Row traffic to 360. But the city is still insisting that we do a turn lane for westbound Park Row traffic coming from 360.
That's correct, yes, so.
Okay, why would we be, do we have a significant number of students who roll into campus from 360?
We do, on projects like this, well, when there's a new school being erected or a significant addition, a change like we did with the gun, we're asked to participate in a traffic analysis study. And so we have engineers who go out, you see this on the roadways a lot, you see the rubber cords that go across the roads, the little yellow boxes and stuff, and they're literally counting cars that might be turning into a drive or a property.
Yeah.
And schools are notorious for bringing traffic, right? Well, but especially an elementary school, into a neighborhood. And so they did the traffic studies and determined that we had a certain number of cars that were making left turns and right turns into and onto Catalo. And then obviously they want us to, let me just stop there. So into and off of Catalo and the same with Park Road Drive. Initially, there was a turn lane, that was asked for off of Catalo into our drive. And then another one, as you pointed out, westbound off of Park Road Drive onto Catalo. And then the third, a left turn, off of Park Road Drive. And the left turn off of Park Road Drive, we were able to explain that, again, that we didn't have enough traffic. We felt like that would drive that turn lane, taking a left. However, we do have a significant number of right turns off of Park Road Drive onto Catalo and resultingly off of Catalo into our parking or into our driveways. And so in order to be safe, when people start to decel and make that right turn, and we do that on a lot of our campuses, we've done that. The city asked for us to make sure we had that decel lane there to get people safely out of traffic and make that right turn lane. And so it worked out well. We used the information from that traffic study to mitigate one turn lane, but the other two, justifiably, they do meet the requirements to have us put those in place. And they're not, in a development like we're doing now, the cost is significantly low because it blends in with all of the other significant amount of concrete that we're pouring. So if it were just a turn lane, it would be a great deal more expensive than what it is in that. So, but it's just, again, it's mitigated with the vast amount of concrete we're pouring.
Okay, those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. So is there a motion to now accept the consent agenda item, Alpha J?
I'll make the motion.
Sorry. Mr. Wilbanks.
I move acceptance of consent agenda J.
Okay, do you have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Wilbanks, a second by Mrs. Fowler. Any other discussion? Seeing none, yes, Dr. Reich?
I'm prepared to move forward with this vote. I just want to say that with the majority of Mr. Chappa's comments, I do agree. It's a travesty of what's happening, and I understand and respect the let's fix the process, but I think we need to do maybe some formal pushback as an entity, not to the city, but to the city advising that their third-party engineering firm consultant, you hire a consultant, what's their job? To find something. So in order for them to keep themselves relevant, they're going to find things and say, oh, well, you need this, you need this. And I think it's a little bit on the city for not questioning what those results are. And I think for us, if there's not formal opportunity, we should work on creating opportunity to have a mechanism in there, even on the front end, if that's fixed, to be able to appeal on what those decisions are before we get presented with, oh, we're working up this budget and we've got to tack on $600,000 because of what the city said. Maybe it's okay in most situations, but there's no formal validated, or no formal process to validate that for us right now. And I agree with Mr. Chapa wholeheartedly. This is taking money away from our students. It's wrong. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reich. Okay, once again, we had a motion and a second, so at this time, please vote. Okay, we have 6 vote yes, 1 vote no. Motion passes. Okay, next on our agenda is our discussion item. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays. And this evening, we bring, as we do every board meeting, an update on progress monitoring. And in this case, it'll be about pre-K. And we will have a brief presentation and some discussion about some root cause and things like that. So it'll be led off by Dr. Wertz.
Hi, good evening, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. I'm here to provide the middle of year results for our pre-K screener that was conducted earlier this year, early this month. So we have 2 goals, just as a reminder, that the board adopted in connection to pre-K. These were connected to House Bill 3, which is intended to ensure that our 3rd grade students are reaching the expectation for passing rates in reading and mathematics. And in pre-K, we set 2 goals, one in reading, that our students would reach the benchmark point of 73%, and then mathematics composite score of 66%, reaching that target. We utilize a system called Circle to progress monitor our students in pre-K. Our 3-year-olds are assessed around rapid letter naming, rapid vocabulary, phonological awareness, mathematics, and social and emotional well-being. And then our 4-year-olds also have very similar areas with the addition of early writing. It's also important to note that while these are just broad subcategories, there are various subtests that are actually assessed within each of these categories. As a reminder from our last conversation, students who reach each of these areas, percentage points, are considered either on track, monitored, or needing support. And so as we look at our data, we try to analyze which of our students are progressing at the rate that's going to arrive at the destination point we're looking towards in terms of our goal, and which students need additional support and need to be monitored along the way. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to share some of the data points to articulate how kids have performed, and then I'm going to turn some time over to Dr. Buell, who will share some insights from the campuses in connection to pre-K. So in reading, we have a goal to move from 70% of our students being on track to 80% by August of 2026. This slide basically is designed to share with you how students, what percentage of students by subgroup are actually reaching the middle of year target, and the thresholds have been established by the vendor. So this is not necessarily in relationship to the end of year target that the board adopted. This is in essence saying which percentage of kids are reaching the target that we would have established in the middle of the year to show that they're pacing towards that end point. So as you can see right now, all students are 71% are actually reaching the middle of year target, which is up from 54% at the beginning of year. And then you can go down the list to see which other students are actually performing. This slide articulates how many students or what percentage of students by subgroup have already reached the end of year target that was established by the board in the adoption of the goal. So at the beginning of the year, for example, 38% of our students had reached that target. Right now, as of middle of year, 67% of our students had reached that target. Our goal, of course, is by the end of the year that 73% of our students will have reached the target. But if you'll notice on the right-hand side, the difference of growth between middle of year and beginning of the year is in the green. And so you can see we had a 29% increase in the percentage of students that had reached the end of year target by the middle of the year. The structure of the slides for mathematics are very similar. We have our middle of year targets. Our goal, for example, for year one is that 66% of our students would reach the end of year target, and our goal is to get to 76 by the year of 2026. This is the middle of year benchmark target that was established by the vendor, and 84% of our students in mathematics are actually reaching that target. Some of their areas of strength included counting sets, shape naming, number naming, shape discrimination, and then some areas that they continue to struggle with, including rote counting and operations. In terms of meeting the end of year target, we have 67% of our students in pre-K that have already reached the end of year target point in terms of our cut point that the board established. This is a 30% increase from the beginning of the year. And so if things were to stay exactly the way they are now, we would have actually reached the goal. So we're on track to get there. You'll also notice that in some of our populations that typically have more challenging learning situations like special education, that the growth in both reading and math have shown increases in pre-K. So now what I'd like to do is turn some time over to Dr. Buell, and she'll talk to you a little bit about some of the practices that we believe are contributing to the areas of strength and some of the constraints that we're still experiencing in the classroom.
All right, thank you. So we looked at what some of the practices are that are contributing to the strengths that we've got and the growth in our students. And one of them is the lesson design, and we support that through our PLCs that we have with our teachers. Those follow each of the CLI assessments that are given each year, and then also providing data support to our teachers so that as they interpret this data, they can use that in order to inform the teaching and learning in their classroom. So since this is a newer assessment for us, we are making sure that we're providing that support. I actually got to sit in on a PLC last week that Dr. Orsini was leading with the teachers. Also, the small group instruction, not unlike we're doing at our other grade levels with that focus. Small group instruction is more important than it's ever been just because of our students and missing out on some of that instruction. So in that small group instruction, it allows us to provide differentiation that's targeted and meets the needs of each of the students. And then the last, I can give an example of this with the aligned instructional resources, and it's so important that that curriculum, the instruction, and the assessment all match. One example of this is the social emotional resources that we put out for our teachers this year. For instance, in pre-K, they focus on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making. All very developmentally appropriate for pre-kindergartners, and we know that that's really important, and that's a gap that they've missed with being out of school. So that's an example of the alignment that Dr. Orsini and her team are bringing together to support the campuses. We want our teachers to have those aligned resources. And then next, looking at the constraints. What is it that might be keeping, am I gonna advance that? There we go, sorry. For the constraints, which may be hindering some of the progress for our students, we looked at those. One of them is on the delayed student enrollment. When you look at the enrollment trends, especially over the last 2 years, there's a larger gap with when our students are enrolling in school, and it's pretty clear. So we looked at the beginning of the year data, and then we looked at the snapshot data. Many of our students, while our enrollment's going up, many of those students didn't come to us until snapshot date. that represents a lot of learning time, especially when you're talking about a 4-year-old. So that's something that we're going to continue to work on as a district and think about how do we get our learners here earlier in the school year. The other one is student attendance, and I could say this about a lot of grade levels, but today specifically about pre-K, is that if you look at the trends in enrollment the last 2 years, we've really struggled with getting our youngest learners to school. So we're doing a couple of things to address that. Right now, each of our principals is developing an attendance plan where they're really focusing specifically on their data and what they can do to incentivize, to educate, to reinforce, to try to get as many gains as we can here the last fifth and sixth 6 weeks. But we also know that there's a bigger picture to that. So at the same time, we're also starting to think about if this is kind of our reality and we're re-educating about how important attendance is, what can we do from the system level to encourage attendance and to try to get that up. So we're thinking about it for this year, but we're also thinking about what are the implications for our work as we move into next year. And then the social emotional needs of students. I've been kind of doing a little listening tour, trying to visit some campuses, and I think this is real and it makes sense to me with that early childhood background is when you're talking a 4-year-old and they've had some missed learning opportunities, it's really significant. And so just the social emotional learning that they may have missed out on, our teachers are working hard to fill that void. And that's foundational to all they're doing. So we know that we need to continue to focus on that. And then the other, and we've talked about it in previous meetings, are just the factors related to COVID. And they're not excuses, but they're things we have to recognize so that we can figure out how do we address those. And those, Dr. Wirtz has presented the research on that before, but life has been different for these students, and they're coming to us with different needs from the break in routine that they've had. They haven't participated in kind of typical life that they might have pre-COVID, joblessness with parents, relocating and going through that, and just those things that help our 4-year-olds to learn and be ready to come to school. Dr. Wirtz?
So this is the middle of the year. We have one more round of assessments that we'll do at the end of the year before we actually land on our targets. As you can see, there's been some significant growth between beginning and middle of year. That's actually expected. That's the what you expect to see is that movement is happening, but we're not there yet. Even though our goals might be in the 70s or 60s, when you're sitting at that in the middle of the year, you have the potential of actually having surpassed your goals significantly by the end. And so our goal is to continue to work with each of these students to address some of these constraints so that we can try to ensure that more and more of the students actually reach the end of year target that will be reported out in June. So any questions that we can answer for you tonight?
Thank you, Dr. Wirtz and Dr. Buell, for this presentation. Mrs. Fowler?
Thank you, President Mays. Thank you both so much. So on the social emotional needs, and we said the teachers are working with them, what exactly is being done to help these students?
Well, we have a curriculum that's been adopted in the pre-K classroom. I shared with you about it a couple of months ago, but basically it allows the students to reflect on their emotional well-being. There's opportunities for them. We have this sounds kind of maybe strange, but there's a stuffed animal in the classroom. They can actually interact with that classroom. There's peer interactions with each other to process some of their feelings. One of the activities that they'll do sometimes when they go into the beginning of the classroom is they'll actually process that I feel this way, and there's an activity for them to engage in. So part of it in pre-K is just helping kids be aware of that they have feelings, what those feelings mean, and what the relationship between those feelings are and the way they interact with each other and with their own self. And so that's actually embedded into their daily instruction in the classroom.
That's wonderful. That sounds really great. And then if a teacher notices that changes in behaviors or notices too many maybe negative comments on how they feel, what is the process for that?
They can reach out to the parents. There's a counselor on campus that they can reach out to, and students can be engaged in guidance with counselors just like any other student regardless of their age. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. Mrs. McMurrough?
Thank you, Dr. Words, Dr. Buell, and thank you, Dr. Orsini, for all the hard work you've been doing. This is all just very promising, very exciting. I love that we prioritize our pre-K or social emotional learning, and they learn through play, even when it's academic. And I just can't help of the implications with next year's universal pre-K. This is just going to be such a game changer for not just our youngest students, but our community as a whole. So I can't wait till April 1st. That's the first date of enrollment, right? For universal pre-K, and just thank you. Thanks to all our pre-K teachers, and thanks for everyone's hard work. This is awesome.
Thank you, Mrs. McMurrough. Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Mays, and to my colleague, Ms. McMurrow, I was thinking the exact same thing. This is a propitious sign for these kids in that we are doing things right, at least, at this grade level, and it is a propitious sign for all the kids that are going to be able to go through our universal pre-K. Looking at these, these are great numbers, and I was kind of trying to extrapolate between this set of data with the data that were presented last time. And the thing that's different to me is these kids really haven't been affected by the learning loss previously. The previous kids in our younger elementary grades have experienced. And the difference is pronounced. There was significant learning loss. And these kids are starting off right. They're on a great track. It looks great. So we know we're doing things right, but it also means that we still have a lot of heavy lifting to do for those kids that did experience learning loss. But again, this is great news, and I can't, like Ms. McMurrow, I can't wait to see even more kiddos going through and experience the great things that our pre-K program are doing and with the results that we're getting. So thank you guys. Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. The only one comment that I want to make is for the constraints to academic progress. I like how you stated how each campus principal gets to kind of work on that for their students, and I really like that because we know constraints can sometimes just be based on environment, based on area, so I really liked that part. Other than that, we have no other questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. We're getting to the end. My voice is about to go. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is our open forum for non-agenda items. Mrs. Benjamin, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding non-agenda? We do not, so we will continue moving. Next on our agenda is our superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. I'd like to share a bit of information about our district, and many of you are familiar with this because you attended some of these. I want to thank everyone, first and foremost, who had a hand in Saturday's United States Army Field Band and Soldiers Choir performance at our Center for Visual and Performing Arts Center. So their America the Beautiful show was outstanding, and you can see some pictures, but if you were able to attend, just simply outstanding. A special thank you to a lot of people, and I can't name all of them, but the team at the CVPA is outstanding, and I'm just so proud of them for helping this become a reality and actually make it seamless and an enjoyable event. And of course, our 2014 bond, our voters, a lot of people to thank because this is a venue that is highly sought after now that it's in the circuit, if you will, because it is exceptional for performances and things like that. So congratulations to them, and thank you to everyone who worked on that. Congratulations to Foster Elementary students and staff for their success in the recent Super Bowl of Caring food drive. In the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, the school collected more than 1,400 food items that were donated to Mission Arlington. And to add a little competitive spirit to the food drive, the school was split into 4 houses with, of course, the smallest house collecting the most items because it was highly competitive. So thanks to everyone also who had a hand in Tuesday night's annual College and Career Expo at the Dan Dipert Career and Technical Center. again, another exceptional opportunity, another exceptional facility for our students to participate, parents to participate, to come together. This is the first time we've had it since 2019, the event itself, and it was done in person. We had more than 70 colleges and universities and businesses and employers and internship opportunities on hand. It was a packed house, and thank you to our partners. I call them Inspire Ed, but maybe they're inspired. I'm not sure, but it's Inspire Ed. They've run this program with us very smoothly, so thank you to them. Last week, Sam Houston High School wrapped up its annual Black History Month with a special guest of Arlington Police Chief Al Jones, who visited with students in the auditorium after school. He had an open discussion with students, an open dialogue. It was much appreciated, and the students had important questions for our Chief of Police, and so I want to thank him for participating in that and being part of that. The next day, there was the Crouch Elementary Reading Rocks event, which seems to be very, very popular, and it's an annual tradition. And it's our mayor was able to join, and a couple of trustee members as well, to that. And there was a question-answer session. I didn't go to this event with the mayor, but I've been with him when he has question-answer sessions, and they're quite interesting. I'll just leave it at that. But so anyway, he was able to participate, and I want to thank everyone. Crouch Elementary does an exceptional job. This has been a tradition, and I thank them very much. Then I want to send a special thank you and appreciation to our educational diagnosticians and our school social workers. This is an annual week. They are honored, and I just want to thank them personally for everything they do to help our students who need it the most. So thank you to our diagnosticians and our social workers, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos, and yes, congratulations and thanks very much to those groups. Mrs. Fowler.
Thank you, President Mays. With the College and Career Expo that Dr. Cavazos was talking about, Mrs. McMurrow and I were there. And one of the things that I've really loved is seeing even our junior high kids that were there. And I'd say, well, you know, what grade are you in? Thinking maybe they were 10th or 11th, because kids just seem to be tall now. And they would say, I'm in 7th grade, or I'm in 8th grade. And they were already there with their mom or dad thinking about college or a career. And I was so impressed with those students, and they were serious about it. I was at the Arlington Baptist University table, and they would come up and they would ask questions, and they were interested, and I was just very impressed with that. You know, you would think maybe the 11th or 12th graders would be there, but the fact that those junior high kids were there already thinking about their futures, I was very impressed.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. And yes, they are getting taller and bigger. Mr. Wilbanks.
Thank you, President Mays. And I just want to say thank you again for, this has been a really tough week, and having the support of my colleagues means a lot to me. And I just ask that you continue to keep my nephew, who has grown a lot over this last 2 months, dealing with a difficult situation, losing the only parent he's really known, and my sister's husband, you know, that he'll continue to be cared for going forward. And I do want to point out to people that, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but COVID's been tough for a lot of people, for our teachers, for our students, but I don't think people realize that it's had a toll on quite a few different industries, not just in education. And it's been particularly bad on, well, I like to say that COVID's exposed a lot of systemic cracks in our society that have always existed, and brought them to the breaking point. And the healthcare in rural America right now is at a critical breaking point. And I pray for our leaders that we finally fix the healthcare system here, because it's not good right now. And now's the time for us to look at what's happened in the last 2 years and find the resolve to finally move it forward and move it to a place it should be, because we as Americans all deserve the best health care in the world. This is the best country in the world. We deserve the best healthcare in the world. That's all I'll say. I won't get on a soapbox any longer. But again, thank you guys for all your support.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. And you would hope that as cracks and things that are brought to the surface to make people aware of things that are disenfranchised for certain groups of people, certain areas, that we take that information and try to do better in the future, not just recognize it, but actually try to make a change. So thank you for that comment, David. I do not see any other lights, so I will take it upon myself to give my report. It is also Women's History Month. And so with that being said, I believe my philosophy is that you rise by lifting up others. So as the current female president of the AISD School Board, I'm selected by my peers all sitting here. I just want to say thank you and pay homage to those prior female presidents that have served before me and that actually led the path. So that would be Diane Patrick, Sherry Wade, Gloria Pena, and Jamie Sullins. And just to mention, today is Jamie's birthday, so happy birthday, Jamie Sullins. So my quote is, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to let them reduce you," by my favorite poet, Maya Angelou. So with that being said, it is 9:55, and Ms. Secretary, do we have any items to report?
No, Madam President, we do not.
Okay. Still 9:55. This meeting is adjourned.